The story begins in a noble's mansion where a blind boy named Kunan is surrounded by his loved ones, all of whom have sympathetic looks on their faces. Everyone has always told him that his eyes weren't capable of seeing, so he often wonders what it really means to see. His father explains to him that seeing means having the ability to perceive colors and shapes. Apparently, Kunan became blind because his eyes bear the hero's scar, a mark left by the famous knight Hister Hulia. Having such a scar isn't ordinary, his father tells him, so Kunan should feel somewhat proud of it and not ashamed. Despite that, even the maids whisper among themselves, thinking it's still sad, and they can't help but feel bad for him. Kunan overhears them and wonders why they would feel sorry for someone just because that person cannot see. Later that day, his magic teacher arrives, and a maid walks him over to the study room. On the way, Kunan asks the maid whether it's even necessary for him to learn magic at all. The maid tells him that it would be a waste of his talent if he doesn't. He was born with a water crest, and being able to use magic is a huge skill, a mark of pride he should take seriously. Kunan, however, doesn't see the point. Even if he learns to use magic, he still won't be able to go anywhere without someone guiding him along the way. When they arrive at the study room, he is introduced to his magic teacher, Jenny, who says it will be an honor to teach him magic. Shortly after, they begin their lessons, and Kunan appears to be a natural. He successfully performs his first spell on the very first try, creating a ball of water. Since Kunan cannot see, he has no idea what the spell looks like. Jenny explains that he is currently using water magic to make a water ball about the size of an eyeball. Hearing those words suddenly gives Kunan an idea. If he gets good enough at magic, he might even be able to create new eyeballs with his powers, which would allow him to see. From that day forward, Kunan gives himself the hope that through magic, he may one day be able to see shapes and colors just like everyone else. One day, during lunch, for the first time ever, Kunan becomes curious about what ingredients are in his sandwich. The maid comes over and explains each one to him in detail. Cooking for him suddenly feels much more rewarding now that he is genuinely interested in the food itself. After lunch, his tutor, Flora, meets him to read a book and asks him what story he wants to hear today. Kunan answers that he wants to hear the story of the famous knight Hister Hulia. Flora hesitates when she hears this because she knows that Hister is the knight somewhat responsible for Kunan's blindness. The maid notices her hesitation and gives her a thumbs up, telling her that it will be fine. Flora agrees, but she asks Kunan to let her know if the story is too disturbing. Kunan promises her that he won't mind, explaining that he is eager to learn all kinds of information. As Flora narrates the story, Kunan learns that a long time ago, there was a war between the heroes of the world and the demon lord. Hister, the nation's hero, finally defeated the demon lord, but lost an arm and a leg in the process during a fierce battle. Since that war, every now and then, descendants of hero are born missing something, like a limb, their eyesight, or some other body part. People call these children the reincarnation of the hero or the hero's scar. Despite hearing all this, Kunan quietly thinks to himself that it's all nonsense. He knows that this is his life, and what truly matters is his own magical power. He does not need to be defined by someone else's story or by legends of heroism. What he can do with his magic is what shapes his future, not the myths surrounding the hero's scar. He has firmly made up his mind that through the use of magic, he is going to learn how to master it properly and eventually create eyeballs for himself using magic. However, all of this intense magic training ends up being far too strenuous on his young body, and as a result, he collapses from overwhelming fatigue. Aiko quickly rushes over and takes him back inside, so he can rest and clear his head. After he eventually comes back to his senses, Kunan makes up his mind once again that he needs to improve both his knowledge and his stamina, because passing out after prolonged use of magic is completely unacceptable for someone aiming to achieve such an ambitious goal. He realizes that in order to keep using magic for long periods, he needs to strengthen his physical body as well. Aiko suggests that he begin sword practice to build muscle and endurance, and also increase his food intake to support his growing body. However, she explains that all of this needs to be done in careful phases rather than all at once, once, or else he could harm himself. With that plan in mind, Kunan begins his training under one of the best retired swordsmen in the country, Master Yuoro. Although the training is difficult and exhausting, Kunan is clearly making steady progress little by little. Eventually, it becomes time for his magic lesson, so Jenny arrives at the training area and Master Yuoro steps away to give them space. Jenny walks up to Kunan and tells him that she is impressed to see that he has started sword fighting practice as well. Kunan confirms this and explains that he is going to need a huge amount of stamina if he wants to achieve his goal. Jenny has always known Kunan as a gloomy and quiet child, but now she can clearly see that something has changed. He no longer feels empty or lost, and instead has a strong motivation pushing him forward. They then begin their magic class, and Jenny asks Kunan to repeat the spell they practiced during the last lesson. Previously, Kunan was only able to cast a single ball of water, but now he easily creates 6 or even 7 water balls at the same time. Jenny finds this completely unbelievable because she didn't teach him anything new, yet he managed to improve so dramatically on his own. Meanwhile, Princess Mirika, Kunan's fiancée, is scheduled to visit him that afternoon. She feels hesitant about the meeting because Kunan has always been far too gloomy for her liking. She understands that this political marriage is her duty as royalty, but she struggles to imagine spending the rest of her life with someone who feels so distant. However, when she arrives at the mansion, she immediately notices that something is different. Kunan has a new energy about him, and he even holds an engaging conversation with her. He shows her the water magic he has been practicing, and she finds it genuinely interesting. They end up spending the entire day together having a wonderful time. On the carriage ride back home, Mirika blushes as she thinks about him and finds herself eagerly waiting for the next time they meet. Kunan, on the other hand, realizes that he may have been taking Mirika for granted all this time. Because of that, he goes to meet Flora and asks her to teach him how to become a proper gentleman who will truly be worthy of Mirika. Later that night, Jenny reflects on Kunan's progress and can't ignore the fact that he was able to cast 7 water balls at the same time, something even she herself is incapable of doing. Kunan has clearly mastered elementary water magic, leaving her with very little left to teach him. Since she still needs to earn her pay, she decides to change her teaching approach. The next day during training, she suggests breaking water magic down into separate steps, such as producing the water, making it float, and maintaining the ball's shape. To demonstrate, she creates 2 water balls, one hot and one cold, and explains that controlling the state of magic is what separates beginner sorcerers from true professionals. Kunan decides to give the technique a proper try, so he pours some water into a cup using his magic. He then hands the cup to Aiko and asks her to taste it. After taking a sip, Aiko pauses for a moment before saying that the water strangely tastes like apples. Jenny tries her best not to show it on her face, but she is clearly irritated and frustrated that Kunan is once again mastering a skill almost immediately after she introduces it to him. That night, Kunan stays awake the entire time, constantly practicing and trying to fully master the technique Jenny taught him. He focuses deeply on visualizing apples in his mind, and while he is able to clearly recreate their shape and scent, he still cannot properly imagine their colors. This becomes a serious problem for him because without being able to perceive color, he will never be able to create the eyeballs he desires. Even so, Kunan refuses to give up and vows to continue trying until he gets it right, no matter how long it takes. The next morning during breakfast, Kunan attempts his magic once again by forming a ball of water. As he carefully moves the floating water ball over the apples on the table, he suddenly stands up in shock. Aiko quickly asks him what happened, and Kunan excitedly explains that through his magic, he is now able to see colors. At first, Aiko doesn't believe him and thinks he might be imagining things, but Kunan proves it by confidently stating that there are 2 green apples and 3 red apples in the bowl. When she checks and realizes he is correct, she becomes overwhelmed with joy and gives him a tight hug to celebrate. Aiko immediately reports this incredible development to Kunan's father, explaining that Kunan Kunan can now use magic to see colors. She adds that the closer an object is and the clearer its shape, the more accurately he can identify its color simply by touching it. Aiko also mentions that this new ability allows Kunan to read books, since he can trace the ink on the pages and recognize the colors. Although he has not yet learned how to read letters properly, she is confident that he will eventually be able to do so. Kunan's father is thrilled upon hearing this news and feels deeply proud that his son is making such real and meaningful progress. The following day, Kunan attempts to surprise Jenny before she arrives by creating a massive red ball of water using his magic. However, just as he is concentrating, the rest of his family suddenly shows up, startling him badly. He loses his composure, causing the red water to burst and splash everywhere, completely covering both him and Aiko. Kunan ends up looking as though he is drenched in blood, which causes his mother to panic in terror and faint on the spot. Kunan has no idea why his mom just fainted, so Aiko explains that blood is red in color, so his mom just got a little spooked out. Kunan's father immediately scolds him for frightening his mother and punishes him by cutting off his allowance for 2 months. As for Aiko, he announces that her pay will be cut for 3 months. Since Aiko is entirely motivated by money, she faints the moment she hears this punishment. Meanwhile, Jenny watches the entire scene unfold from behind a nearby bush. As she observes everything, she realizes that Kunan is far more talented than she ever expected. With the speed of his growth, she comes to believe that he may one day earn the highest honor in the world, the title of Cerulean Sorcerer. A few days later, Kunan's father tells his older brother that he wants to send him to a school. Surprised, Ikshio points out that his brother has never seen the outside world. Gurion agrees, saying that he wants him to ensure his little brother can adjust well in the real world. Hearing this, Ikshio remembers a day from his own childhood when he was leading his brother outside to play. At the time, Kunan was feeling scared, so his brother offered to hold his hand the entire time. However, when he turned around to lead Kunan out, he tripped on the stairs and fell down. As the memory ends, Ikshio keeps his own fears hidden and reassures his dad that he'll do his best for his brother. The next day, Aiko watches curiously as Kunan fiddles with a dish of water. He explains that he enhanced the container with magic to use it as a fun fortune-telling device. Aiko immediately asks Kunan to use the container to find her long-lost will to live, so he tells her that she's still in her prime. She then wonders if Kunan can find her future husband, so he reassures her that a pretty woman like her will have no shortage of suitors. Watching the two of them exchange silly banter, Flora can't help but wonder whether teaching Kunan how to joke around was really a good idea. Afterward, she sits down with him for a lesson. Watching her master joke around, she wonders if he'll become a shallow playboy if he goes down the funny route. However, she feels glad that he has changed so much since he's smiling much more often. After the lesson, Aiko takes Kunan outside the house to meet his dad. Feeling cold, Aiko asks Kunan to make some hot water balls. After creating the water balls, Kunan feels worried that his dad wants to see him so late. Aiko thinks he'll be fine since he hasn't done anything wrong to upset him, except for that blood incident a while back. Kunan reminds her that she was the one who pushed him to do it anyway, but he didn't mind since he enjoyed the experience. Sometime later, they arrive at the main estate, where the head butler, Balin, greets them. Then, Kunan's brother comes over and starts leading him and Aiko towards his dad's chambers. As they walk together, Kunan's brother wonders if he needs his help to move around. Kunan shakes his head, reminding him that he can sense his surroundings pretty well now. His brother nods, still feeling uneasy from the last time he took care of his brother. Soon, they enter a room where both of Kunan's parents are waiting for them. After Kunan and his brother go in, Aiko and Balan remain outside the room. Then, Gurion asks Kunan if he's interested in going to a real school. Kunan refuses, saying that he doesn't want to trouble others to take care of him all the time. After explaining that he's focusing on something important to him at home, Kunan wonders if it's a problem if he doesn't go to school. His dad explains that although noble children are required to attend school, he got special permission from the emperor to keep Kunan at home because of his disability. Kunan feels outraged since he smells nepotism, but Gurion reminds him to focus on the matter at hand. He then asks Kunan to reconsider his decision to stay home. However, Kunan avoids the question and instead asks his dad to restore his allowance. This angers Gurion, so he leaps into a bickering match with Kunan. Luckily, his wife reminds him of his actual goal, so he calms down. He then explains to Kunan that he needs to go to school for Mirika's sake. He reminds Kunan that any noble who doesn't fulfill their duty is shunned by society, so Mirika would get harassed by everyone if she were to marry an illiterate boy. Hearing this, Kunan reconsiders his decision and agrees to go to school. Since he feels upset about going through so much trouble, Gurion reassures Kunan that he only needs to attend the advancement exams held every year. He explains that Kunan only needs to visit the school 5 times for his exams in order to receive his graduation certificate, which makes the boy feel relieved. Ixio also reminds Kunan that he and Mirika are his seniors, so they can guide him through the school. Kunan's mother stands up, excited to get the right uniform for her son, as she calls Aiko and heads outside with her to get Kunan's measurements. Ixio follows her. Gurion stops him, warning that other nobles might bother Kunan and Mirika at school. Ixio understands this and promises to do his best to take care of his brother. The next day, Kunan tells Mirika that he's going to school. She smiles, happy to spend more time with her fiancé. Kunan admits that he's a bit scared of the new environment, so she promises to take good care of him. Kunan thanks her for the help, but thinks that they'll get into trouble with her jealous admirers. Mirika hesitates and acts like it won't be a problem, so Kunan wonders if she isn't popular at school. She quickly shakes her head, proudly admitting that 5 boys have expressed their interest in her. Kunan sighs, realizing that he needs to prepare himself to deal with some jealous teenagers. Later, he dresses up in his uniform to go to school. As Kunan heads out of the house to ride his carriage, Aiko starts fawning over him for his dashing looks. Kunan jokes with her about his good looks before getting inside the carriage. Before they leave, he uses his water spell to coat the carriage's tires in a cushioning gel. Finally, Kunan says goodbye to his family and heads out for the city. As they ride on the carriage, Ixio notes that the tires are running completely smooth on the rough terrain. Kunan explains that he designed the spell for a smooth ride since they could get back pain from all the bumps in the road. Feeling proud of his abilities, he wonders if he can get a job in the future as a magic serviceman. Ixio then asks if he's feeling nervous about school. Kunan shakes his head, saying that he has grown much stronger now. He thanks Ixio for all the times he helped him and apologizes for burdening him with his condition. Kunan also tells Ixio to stop worrying about the time he got injured under his watch. While Ixio is surprised, Kunan tells him that he's now determined to keep moving no matter the hurdles that block his path. Ixio smiles, happy that his brother has changed from his depressed past self. Suddenly, Kunan starts going further and further, saying that he'll even outlive the rest of the world just to properly enjoy his life. In the end, Ixio wonders if the maid is behind the sudden change in his brother's personality. As they get closer to school, Ixio gets surprised since Kunan can detect all the people nearby. Soon, they arrive outside the school's building, where Kunan steps out of the carriage. Mirika rushes over to greet her fiancé, who starts rambling on about how pretty she is. Mirika smiles and returns his banter, leaving Ixio completely baffled. Mirika then turns around to lead Kunan inside, but he remains standing in his spot. While Mirika feels confused, Kunan pays attention to all the voices he's hearing from inside the building. Although he feels some pressure in facing so many people, this time he feels confident that he can handle it. Once he's mentally prepared, Kunan reaches his hand out to Mirika. He asks her to escort him like a delicate girl, so she smiles and agrees. Meanwhile, in another part of the school, Kunan's special teacher, Cast, wonders why her new student hasn't arrived yet. Knowing that Kunan is the son of a marquess, she starts to question whether a teacher as inexperienced as herself is truly capable of instructing him. Cast then hears some girls around her gushing over a handsome new student. While she watches in shock, Kunan walks away with his fiancée. Cast quickly regains her bearings and catches up and introduces herself as his new teacher. Kunan returns her greeting like a girl, explaining that he's playing the part of a delicate lady. This completely stuns Cast, but the school bell rings and breaks her out of the awkward situation. Then, Mirika and Ixio leave Kunan with his teacher and head off to their classes. After the two of them walk away, Cast thinks that she'll have her hands full with this weirdo student. Nearby, some students watch Kunan from a window. One of them points out that Kunan is blessed with a hero's scar, so the prince gets angered. Seeing his anger, the rest of Prince Lyle's lackeys quickly cover up their praises with fake insults. Then, Then, the prince turns around and tells his group to follow him. Meanwhile, Cast gets ready to take Kunan's advancement exam in a private room. She asks Kunan if he knows the gist of it, so he nods. Cast explains that although exams are usually taken with long gaps in between, Kunan will get to attempt his exams in a shorter period. Kunan feels confused, so she reveals that his dad negotiated with the king to get a special exception for his son. Kunan then points out that his dad is actually close friends with the king. However, he can't help but feel guilty that his father had to rely on nepotism on his behalf. Kunan apologizes to Cast for pressuring the school for his sake, but she pretends to ignore it. However, he keeps going and starts complaining about the rampant corruption within noble society. Cast quietly hands Kunan the exam paper, trying to shift his focus to somewhere else. Kunan ignores it and keeps insulting his corrupt father, so Cast finally begs him to stop involving her with the politics of high society. A little while later, she takes Kunan's exam papers and sits alone to grade them. Since Kunan kept yapping about noble families, Cast expects his test answers to be horrible. However, as she actually checks his answers, she gets shocked to see that he got them all correct. Elsewhere, Kunan heads to the cafeteria to have lunch with Mirika. Suddenly, Prince Lyle and his group stop them. Lyle calls out to his sister, prompting her to nervously fuss with her clothes. Kunan wonders who stopped her and steps forward to confront Lyle. Behind them, Ikshyo walks over, shocked to see a noble family member harassing his brother. Meanwhile, Lyle insults Kunan for getting engaged to his sister despite his disability. Although Mirika feels upset, she feels powerless to speak up against her elder brother. Kunan senses her discomfort, so he gets ready to punish Lyle. Before he can move, Ikshyo steps in to mediate the situation. Unfortunately, Lyle gets angry and orders him to get out of the way. While Ikshyo feels trapped, Kunan quietly uses his water spell to gather water from his surroundings. He then directs all of it toward Lyle's pants, making it look like he peed himself. Kunan then innocently points out that the prince has a wet spot on his pants, which shocks everyone. Lyle gets embarrassed and claims that he didn't do it, but he quickly leaves the area to clean himself up. After he leaves, Ikshyo immediately realizes that Kunan played a prank on the prince. He asks his brother if he's the one who messed with Lyle, but Kunan acts like he doesn't know anything. Ikshyo then sits down with Kunan and Mirika to have lunch. After they all get their food, Kunan asks Mirika who Lyle was. She explains that he's her older brother, so Kunan feels sad that he's too mean to her. Kunan thanks Ikshyo for always being a kind sibling to him. Meanwhile, Ikshyo feels terrified since Kunan just humiliated a royal prince in public. Mirika tells him to stop worrying about it, but Ikshyo knows he'll get into trouble soon. Elsewhere, Lyle angrily stomps away, furious about the embarrassment he just went through. Meanwhile, Kunan is having lunch together with his group while they talk about what happened earlier. They all wonder why Lyle openly stood in front of them and didn't even try to hide his violent attitude. Mirika is the first to give her thoughts, presuming that Lyle most likely acted that way to keep her in check. She explains that Lyle is the 6th prince, while she herself is the 9th princess, which naturally places her below him in the royal hierarchy. However, Mirika continues by pointing out that since she is now engaged to Kunan, the situation has changed. Kunan bears the hero's scar and is also a highly capable sorcerer, so because of that, her standing in society has risen dramatically. On top of that, now that Kunan has officially made his debut into high society, both his status and Mirika's would naturally be considered higher than Lyle's. Hearing all of this, Kunan admits that it sounds way too complicated for him to fully understand. So Mirika simplifies it and says that all that really matters is that she's happy to be engaged to him. Kunan smiles and says that he's glad to hear that as well. Still, he mentions that it might be a good idea for him to go and apologize to Lyle, just to avoid future trouble. The moment he says that, both Ikshyo and Mirika immediately shut the idea down and tell him not to even think about doing something like that. Before long, time passes quickly and the day of Kunan's final exam arrives. Before heading out, he squeezes in one last short training session with Jenny. During the session, Kunan creates a ball of water and then smoothly transforms it into a solid ball of ice, shaped and sized like an apple. Seeing this, Jenny is genuinely impressed and comments on how far Kunan has come in such a short period of time. Later that afternoon, Kunan arrives at the academy and prepares himself for the final exam. He looks around at his surroundings and feels a bit excited, as the place truly looks and feels like a real school now. Professor Cast approaches him and wishes him good luck, though she adds that Kunan probably won't need it given how skilled he's become. Shortly after that, several other students gather around and ask Mirka to introduce her fiancé to them. With that cue, Kunon formally introduces himself as Mirka's fiancé and Ikshio's little brother. He puts on a polite and charming demeanor, greeting them and saying that it's lovely to meet everyone. After seeing his behavior and hearing the way he speaks, the other students immediately form the impression that Kunon is a perfect gentleman. At the same time, Lyle is standing off to the side, staring out the window while quietly scheming and cooking up his next plan. His thoughts are interrupted when some of the other students call out to him and tell him to come to the classroom because the final exam is about to begin. Lyle arrogantly responds that he'll come whenever he feels like it. The others quickly remind him that the final exam will be conducted all at once, and if he doesn't show up now, he'll miss it. Lyle takes a look at the expressions on his classmates' faces and gets pissed off because he just realizes that these cowards can't say anything to his face and would rather talk behind his back instead. That realization only fuels his irritation even more, but just then, Kunon suddenly lights up with an excited expression, steps forward, and grabs Lyle's hands, formally introducing himself since he didn't really get the chance to do so properly the other day. Kunon grips Lyle's hand firmly and starts shaking it repeatedly with enthusiasm. Lyle immediately snaps back, reminding Kunon that he never gave him permission to speak to him, let alone touch his hand like that. Kunon quickly apologizes for being rude, but instead of backing off, he immediately starts showering Lyle with even more compliments. The non-stop praise slowly causes Lyle to blush despite himself. Everyone around them notices how flustered Lyle looks, and before long, the students start laughing, amused by the sight since they never imagined Lyle could react like that. Not long after that, everyone takes their seats and the final exam begins. It doesn't take much time before the exams are graded, and Professor Cass stands before the entire class to announce the results. She turns toward the board and draws a flower on it, signaling that the students have passed. The classroom erupts into cheers as the students congratulate one another on successfully passing their final exam. With the final exam completed, Kunon departs in his carriage while waving and bidding everyone farewell, saying that he hopes they'll cross paths again someday. When Kunon arrives back at the mansion, he immediately resumes his training with Jenny. She asks him to create a ball of water and then split it into 10 separate pieces. Kunon does exactly as instructed, but then he tells Jenny that he's been working on a small trick of his own. To demonstrate, he transforms one of the water balls into a bird, which flaps its wings and flies away. Jenny is left completely speechless by what she just witnessed. After a moment, she drops to her knees, realizing that there's almost nothing left that she can teach him anymore. Shortly afterward, the two of them sit down to enjoy some tea together. It's then that Jenny finally decides to be honest and tells Kunon the truth that she truly has nothing more to teach him. She explains that he has already mastered elementary magic, and once he starts learning more advanced spells, he will surpass her in no time. Jenny admits that this has been the case for a while now, which is why she kept coming up with different and seemingly random training exercises out of sheer desperation. Upon hearing this, Kunon immediately stands up in objection. He tells her that he was already aware of it, but those very exercises were what helped him broaden his magical range. He firmly states that if it weren't for those exercises, he never would have come this far. Kunon asks Jenny if she's trying to quit because the pay is too low, and says that if that's really the case, he can simply tell his father to give her a raise. However, Jenny shakes her head and explains that it's actually the complete opposite. She says she finds it unbearable to keep receiving such generous pay when she no longer has a proper role to fulfill as his teacher. Jenny then walks over to Kunon and places her hands on his shoulders, looking straight at him as she tells him that she has truly reached her limit and doesn't have anything more she can teach him. Kunon immediately refuses to accept that. He tells her that he wants her to keep coming up with those small exercises, even if they're nothing more than tricks meant to deceive him. He says he doesn't mind being deceived at all if it means he can continue getting stronger. But Jenny simply looks Kunon directly in the eyes and firmly tells him that she can't do it anymore. After saying that, she turns around and takes her leave. As she walks back home, she reflects on all the incredible things Kunon has accomplished so far and starts to believe that he might truly have what it takes to become the cerulean sorcerer. That thought suddenly sparks a burst of motivation within her. She tells herself that if Kunon can do it, then so can she. She refuses to lose to her own student and realizes that it's still not too late for her to push herself further. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Aiko informs Kunan that Flora has also quit her position. Since Kunan has finished his curriculum and officially graduated from the school for noble children, her duties are complete as well. Kunan feels a bit saddened that he never got the chance to properly say goodbye to her, but the maid explains that Flora didn't say her farewells because she knew she would end up bursting into tears. Hearing that, Kunan decides that he'll send her a letter to properly thank her for everything she's done. Later that evening during dinner, Kunan tells his father, Arsene, about what happened with Jenny and how she resigned from being his magic teacher. He explains that Jenny believed Kunan deserved an exceptionally talented magician as his instructor. As they think about this for a while, Iksho suddenly recalls rumors about an extraordinary royal sorcerer who goes by the name Xianli. Kunan immediately says that he wants Xianli to be his new magic teacher. However, Arsene suddenly speaks up and shuts the idea down, telling them that it won't be happening because it's simply impossible to invite a royal sorcerer to teach here. Apparently, royal sorcerers are extremely high profile in this kingdom and answer only to the king or members of the royal family. On top of that, they rarely leave the castle, which makes getting into contact with them extremely difficult. Hearing this, Kunan comes up with an idea. He plans to accompany his father when he visits the castle, intentionally get lost during the visit, and when one of the royal sorcerers comes to help him, he'll somehow convince them to take him on as an apprentice. However, Arsene immediately shoots down the plan the moment he hears it. He tells Kunan that it's a really dumb idea with a success rate under 10% and says there's no way they'll go through with it, so Kunan should just forget about it. But after Kunan's mother gives Arsene the puppy dog eyes, he immediately changes his mind and says he'll talk to the king about it to see what he can do. A couple of days later, a grandmaster receives Kunan's formal request to be trained by a royal sorcerer. At first, the grandmaster doesn't seem impressed by the request at all and is just about to toss it aside. But then, upon seeing that the request came from Kunan Gurian, the bearer of the hero scar, the grandmaster pauses, clearly intrigued. The following day, Kunan travels by carriage alongside his father to attend a meeting with the emperor. During the ride, Arsene tells him that the emperor is planning to choose a royal sorcerer to become Kunan's instructor. This makes Kunan wonder if his father had used his influence behind the scenes to make it happen. However, Arsene clarifies that he did nothing of the sort, explaining instead that every royal sorcerer within the imperial palace became interested in Kunan on their own. Curious about how his son managed to draw the attention of such powerful figures, Arsene asks him to explain. In response, Kunan demonstrates his abilities by creating a cat formed entirely from water. Arsene is immediately sold at the sight of the cute cat and wonders if it's truly 100% water. Kunan confirms, explaining that he still needs to perfect the artificial cat's movement pattern to make it act more natural. Watching his dad pet the cat, Kunan wonders if he has a soft spot for them. He suggests getting a pet cat for their household, but Arsene immediately gets defensive, saying that a cute cat would only distract him from his duties. Still, Kunan keeps pressing the matter, so Arsene acts like all the cats running around would make trouble for his blind son. Kunan reminds him that he can see very well with magic now, so Arsene finally reveals that he's not getting a cat because his wife is a dog person. Kunan understands his father's reservations, so he suggests keeping the cat outside the house to satisfy everyone's demands. Arsene thinks about it and decides it might be worth a shot. After a while, they reach the imperial palace, where Princess Raisha greets them. Kunan casually returns her greeting, so Arsene reminds him to be more polite with the princess. Realizing that she's his future sister-in-law, he greets the princess once more with more sincerity. She smiles and returns his greeting, thinking that Kunan seems just as amazing as Mirika described. Then, she notices the cat in Arsene's arms, prompting him to place it on the ground. However, before anything else can happen, Kunan dissolves it into water. While Raisha is surprised that the cat was a magical illusion, Arsene feels heartbroken that he lost his new pet before even giving it a name. This display of abilities makes Raisha reconsider her previous opinion, and she informs Arsene that she'll take him to the Black Tower. He nods and prepares to leave his son in her care, but wonders how Kunan will go back home. Kunan reassures Arsene that he can head home alone, so he nods and promises to send a carriage for him. Then, Kunan also reveals that he's planning to take Mirika on a date, surprising them with his boldness. Sometime later, Raisha leads Kunan inside the imperial palace. As they walk together, she tells Kunan to be alert for some new information, thinking she's about to teach him some top secret magic. Kunan gets excited. However, However, Raisha explains that she can't have such complicated discussions while walking somewhere. Instead, she reveals some history about the royal family. Raisha reminds Kunan that their nation has 7 princes and 10 princesses, and although the first prince is usually crowned ruler, their nation is special since it allows all siblings to compete for the throne. Kunan notes that it's still incredibly difficult to actually overrule the first prince. Raisha also agrees and reveals that she gave up the throne herself just so she could have a safe career as a sorcerer. As they continue to walk, they walk past a strange tower. As soon as Kunan sets his sight on the tower, he stops walking, feeling some incredible mana points radiating from it. Raisha continues forward, not noticing Kunan's discomfort. She turns around to tell him about Mirika's worries, but Kunan surprises her by catching up with magical ice skates. Seeing the cool magic, Raisha instantly forgets about her sisterly advice and asks Kunan to teach her how to skate as well. As he prepares to begin her lesson, she gives him one final warning not to associate himself with any royal faction to avoid getting into unnecessary power struggles. Raisha then quickly gets to business and starts learning how to skate. After some time, she turns into an ice skating pro and starts zooming around the palace's hallways. In the end, the palace staff gets concerned for her safety as Raisha barely manages to avoid bumping into other workers. In the end, the poor workers call over a knight called Dario, who finally ropes Raisha in. After catching them, he gives both Kunan and Raisha a lecture, so they finally admit their mistake. Elsewhere, Arson notices the commotion caused by Kunan's stunt. He asks a guard what happened and spits his tea out after learning that his son was treating the palace's hallways as a skating rink. Sometime later, Kunan enters Lord Londamon's quarters, where he greets the Grand Royal Sorcerer. Kunan nervously greets him, feeling incredible pressure from his mana. Londamon gets interested in Kunan's water crest and inspects his right shoulder. He finds out that the mark is a 2-star, which leaves Kunan confused. Londamon explains that every magician can use one of 7 elements: fire, water, earth, wind, light, dark, and foul. The ability of a magician to use an element is classified into 5 ranks, from 1 to 5 stars. Kunan realizes that he's still the second weakest rank when it comes to real sorcerers. Raisha also informs him that she's a 2-star wind mage, so he realizes that Londamon must be of a higher rank. Londamon wonders how Kunan can tell his rank, so he explains that he judged it from his immense magic pressure. Kunan makes a guess that Londamon is a 3-star, but he learns that the old man is actually an impressive 4-star mage. Londamon notes that Kunan isn't too impressed by his strength, so the Kunan explains he doesn't even know what his rank signifies yet. Then, he asks Londamon if a sorcerer's rank limits the kind of magic they can use. Londamon explains that a sorcerer's rank only determines the total amount of mana they have, not the kind of spells they can use. After his explanation, he wonders if Kunan is ready to focus all his energy on learning more magic. Kunan nods, so Londamon gets excited for the days ahead of them. Afterward, he takes the kid to a ground where they're surrounded by all the royal mages. Londamon asks Kunan to display some of his impressive magic abilities, so Raisha excitedly tells him that Kunan truly lives up to his hype. As Londamon feels jealous of her, the other royal mages also get interested in Kunan's abilities. Kunan realizes that he might be able to join their ranks if he passes Londamon's test, so he decides to get serious. Then, Londamon calls over a magician called Victo. Victo walks up and uses a water spell to create dozens of water balls around him. While Kunan is amazed by all the balls arranged in such a neat formation, Londamon wonders if he can steal Victo's balls away from him. This reminds Kunan of a lesson he had with Flora, when she explained that not only can he create new water from mana, but he can also control existing water. Still, Kunan feels nervous about tampering with water created by another magician. He focuses his mind and uses his water spell to manipulate Victo's balls, but the skilled royal magician resists Kunan's mana. Still, Kunan remains determined to keep pushing. After putting all his effort into pulling Victo's balls, he manages to steal 2 of them before Londamon ends his exam. In the end, Kunan feels shocked that he could only pull 2 balls, and realizes the depths of a royal sorcerer's true power. However, Londamon feels very impressed, and Victo also admits that he didn't think Kunan could steal a single one. Victo then asks Londamon if he can teach Kunan, but all of the other royal mages start screaming at him. Raisha reminds Victo that he recently broke up with his girlfriend, so an incompetent fool like him has no right to teach such a talented student. student. Watching all the royal mages argue to get Kunan, Londamond praises the young boy. Kunan wonders if he passed the exam, but Londamond asks him to entertain him a bit more. Soon, he starts bouncing on a water trampoline created with Kunan's genius methods. Watching their leader enjoy himself, the jealous royal mages ask him for a turn. Londamond turns a blind eye to all his students and instead asks Kunan how he created the water cushion. Kunan explains that he created the trampoline using special stretchy water, so Raisha wonders if he could create a soft mattress out of it as well. Finally, Londamond stops riding the water trampoline, and Kunan tells him that he could create one that could take him all the way to the second floor in a single jump. Shocked, all of the royal mages ask to see his grand creation in action. However, Kunan refuses, explaining that he needs to visit Mirika for their date soon. Raisha then asks Kunan to make a water animals for her since he doesn't have the time for a bigger trampoline. She wonders if he can make artificial humans as well, so Kunan nods. He quickly makes a life-sized replica of his personal maid, whose realistic features surprise everyone. Since the maid puppet is created with water, the royal mages wonder if it can perform in human movements. Kunan admits that the first time he made his puppet fly, it wasn't a very pleasant experience. Still, the curious royal mages ask him to demonstrate, so he manipulates the maid puppet to fly around the palace. As the puppet floats around like a motionless ghost, the clueless palace staff gets terrified. After some time, they all find out the true culprits and give all the mages a proper chewing out. Afterward, all the royal mages start blaming each other for pushing Kunan. Kunan feels upset that he messed up 2 different times on the same day, so Londamond tells him to cheer up. He asks Kunan to show him some more tricks the next time they meet, before giving him the good news that he's accepted into the Royal Mage Academy. Surprised, Kunan celebrates his achievement, but gets worried that he'll be forced to side with a royal faction. Raisha reassures him that royal mages have nothing to do with internal power struggles, so he can put all his focus into learning magic. Then, Londamond asks Kunan if he has a goal to achieve by learning advanced magic. Kunan explains that he wants to create a working eyeball with his water magic, so all of the royal mages acknowledge his lofty ambitions. A little while later, Kunan's spirits get dampened as his father scolds him for creating such a mess in the palace. Raisha tries to protect Kunan by saying it was the royal mage's idea, but Arson still blames his son since he's responsible for carrying out all the spells. Hearing his father's rightful anger, Kunan admits he was in the wrong and apologizes for hurting the innocent staff. After that, he says his goodbyes to Arson, who heads back home in his carriage. Since Kunan is staying back at the palace, Raisha reminds him that he has a date with Mirika soon. Shocked, he realizes that he completely lost track of time. Since he's getting late, Raisha offers to transport him quickly with the assistance of her wind magic. Together, the two of them get on a giant bubble created with Kunan's magic, and Raisha lifts them into the air and propels them forward using her wind. In just a short while, they reach their destination. However, Raisha flubs the landing and makes them free fall to the ground. Luckily, Kunan's soft bubble cushions the fall, which prevents them from turning into meat pancakes. Soon enough, Dario finds the two of them collapsed on the ground, knowing they pulled off yet another reckless stunt. Meanwhile, Mirika fusses over which clothes to wear on her date with Kunan. Watching her so flustered over a boy, her maid wonders what kind of man Kunan is to make her lady's heart swoon. Meanwhile, Mirika paces back and forth in her room, anxious about her meeting with Kunan. Soon after, a few servants let the maid know that Kunan has come to the castle to escort their young lady. The maid goes to relay the message to Mirika, and the moment she hears that Kunan has arrived, Mirika immediately hurries off to meet him without saying a single word. After she steps outside the castle, Kunan greets her with a polite bow and wishes that the night sky looks pretty on their date night. He then offers to escort her to their carriage, so Mirika shyly takes his hand. After a little while, they reach a restaurant where Kunan and Mirika dine together. As the food arrives, Kunan offers a toast to his fiancée. Watching his gentlemanly behavior, Mirika's maid finally understands why her young lady adores him so much. Mirika asks Kunan about his experience at the Black Tower, so he reveals that all of the royal teachers treated him well. He also informs her that he passed the entrance test with flying colors and is expecting a suitable royal teacher to take him in. As Kunan goes on about his story, he sneaks in bits and pieces of sneaky compliments to Mirika as well. These compliments only keep rolling on as Kunan keeps going, making sure that Mirika never feels like she's getting sidelined. Watching nearby, Mirika's maid thinks that the young master's tastes are a bit strange, but she feels happy that her young lady likes him. Then, Kunun suddenly stops his frivolous jokes and gets serious. He apologizes to Mirika for only being able to give her a small dinner. However, Kunun declares that when they get married, he will make sure to spend every day with her as proof of his love. As Kunun's passionate declaration leaves even the maid flustered, Mirika looks forward to their future together. Although she acts dignified and composed at the restaurant, she throws a total girl fit after returning home. A few days later, Kunun is writing a letter when Aiko calls him outside. After going out, he uses a water spell to help her clean some sheets. Aiko feels happy that she can slack off at work, but Kunun reminds her that she just interrupted his important homework. However, she acts like she was just doing him a favor by making him leave the room and touch grass. Aiko tells Kunun that he needs to spend time outdoors to grow up healthy, so he gets into a complex about his short height. To comfort him, Aiko claims that she likes her master no matter his height. Kunun smiles and begins returning the favor, but he stops short to avoid complimenting a girl other than his fiancée. After a short while, both of them get done with all the clothes. Kunun asks Aiko if she got any letters for him, but she shakes her head. Kunun realizes that the Royal Academy still couldn't decide on a suitable teacher for him. Meanwhile, in the Black Tower, Victo calls out to a professor in his room. After receiving no response, he walks up to the room and enters without permission. Victo calls out to Professor Xian inside the room, who gets upset that he interrupted his sleep. Victo tries to explain that he didn't want to disturb him anyway, but the Grand Master is calling for Xian's presence. Hearing that the chief sorcerer has called him, Xian calms down and gets serious. A few days later, back in Kunun's mansion, he happily informs Aiko about his new teacher. She asks him which one he got, so Kunun explains that he got a guy called Xianli Fishroll. Hearing Xian's name, Aiko's eyes start glowing with excitement. Kunun also thinks it's a great opportunity to work with a talented guy, but Aiko has her sights set on Xian as his next wife. Surprised, Kunun wonders how she even knows him, so Aiko explains that Xian is a handsome man, most popular among women her age. She then asks her young master to put in a good word for her, but Kunun feels jealous about showing her off to another man. Unfortunately for him, Aiko cold-heartedly shrugs off his concerns and leaves to get dolled up for her fantasy man. Meanwhile, in Mirika's place, Reisha asks for her permission to leave the Black Tower. Mirika agrees to let her go out under the guise of using her protection, so Reisha heads out with her. As they walk together, Reisha's attention soon drifts off to Kunun. She feels upset that Xian got to be his teacher even though he didn't even appear during the test. Suddenly, both of them encounter two of Mirika's sisters, Evril and Ladelia. As Mirika greets the girls, they mock her, acting like she got lucky to be matched up with a talented sorcerer. Reisha steps in and reminds the girls it's none of their business, so both of them get angry. She then asks them to step out of the way, so the girls finally buckle under her pressure. After they leave, Reisha comforts Mirika, who thanks her for the help. Once Mirika feels better, Reisha goes back to fuming about Xian's good luck. Soon, Mirika goes out, where Xian is waiting for her in a carriage. Back at Kunun's mansion, he calmly sips tea in his backyard when Mirika sneakily pulls up in her own carriage. Kunun goes to see her, so Mirika wonders if he was surprised. He says that her presence is a welcome sight. Kunun starts rambling on and on about how happy he is to see her. This time, Xian cuts his yapping short after stepping out of the carriage. Feeling his teacher's oppressive aura, Kunun instantly sobers up and grows quiet. As Xian stands there, menacingly, Aiko's heart races 1,200 miles a minute while she tries to act all dignified. Meanwhile, Kunun observes how dense Xian's mana is and realizes that he might even be stronger than Landemont himself. Watching him stand there in silence, Mirika wonders if Kunun is okay. In reality, he continues internally fangirling over Xian. After realizing that everyone's watching him, Kunun apologizes for ignoring them and introduces himself to Xian. He then asks Xian if he can call him Professor Honey after the thick nature of his mana, but Xian coldly refuses. Kunun wonders what he should call his master, so Xian asks him to use his real name like a normal person. He also expresses his dislike towards Kunun's attitude and reveals that he's only here because he was forced to become his teacher. Kunun realizes that Xian must owe some kind of favor to the Grand Sorcerer, which led to him becoming his teacher. Kunun is surprised that Landemont would send the most powerful sorcerer in the academy for him, but Xian gets offended by his nickname for the old-timer. As things get heated, Dario steps out from the carriage to calm both of them down. down, Kunan greets Dario and thanks him for keeping him in check during his time with Reisha. Then, he focuses on Xian again and wonders if he's as handsome as the rumors describe him. Xian thinks it's only natural, but Kunan explains he was just making sure since he can't see. Hearing this, Xian thinks that the young boy is only making fun of him. Kunan denies it, so Xian wonders just what goes on inside. After some time, everyone gets seated at Kunan's backyard table. He thanks Mirika for bringing Xian over, but she confesses that she just sneaked a trip to meet him herself. Kunan starts flirting with Mirika again, but Xian interrupts him and reminds him that it's bad manners to be so bold in front of his teacher. He then asks Kunan to have a discussion about magic with him, so Dario realizes that he's about to cause trouble for him. First, Xian asks Kunan if he knows anything about compound spells. Kunan explains that normal magical spells are cast using circular mana molds. To create a compound spell, a magician must layer multiple magical circles over one another. Xian nods at his explanation and asks how many layers he has been able to create. Kunan shyly explains that he can only create 32 layered compound spells, thinking that the number is too low. However, Xian is surprised since he wasn't expecting him to be so proficient. He then reveals that he can create over 50 layered compound spells, which leaves Kunan completely impressed. Xian asks Kunan how he got over the first hurdle of 10 layers, so Kunan explains that he modified the spells on his own to bypass the bottleneck. Hearing this, Xian wonders how a kid can be talented enough to modify intricate magical spells like Play-Doh. He recalls his last discussion with Victo, who was incredibly jealous that he was getting Kunan as his student. Reisha had also confronted him in her rage, but Xian had no interest at the time since he was only following Londamon's orders. Seeing him in person, he finally realizes why all the teachers at the Black Tower were so interested in this kid. Instead of teasing Kunan further, he sincerely asks him to demonstrate his abilities. Kunan asks Xian to teach him the 50-layer spell first, but Xian tells him it's way out of his league at the moment. He tells the young boy to show him his best and begs him for his guidance, but Mirika thinks there's no way her fiancé would stoop so low. Just a second later, Kunan does exactly that and starts begging for Xian's guidance. He starts glazing his teacher and calls him every praise in the sun, thinking it's totally worth it if he gets to advance his magic. In the end, Xian gets creeped out by Kunan's shameless praises and tells him to quiet down. However, he gives in to Kunan's praise and decides to show off a bit of his abilities. Xian constructs a powerful earthen wall with his magic, challenging Kunan to break it as his first lesson. Kunan wonders how he can destroy such a powerful wall, so Xian tells him to create a waterbed for him while he watches. Kunan creates the soft bed, which instantly captures Xian with its softness. After lying on the waterbed for a few minutes, Xian enjoys its softness so much that he falls asleep. Meanwhile, Kunan feels out the earthen wall to check for any weaknesses in its structure. As he senses the wall's composition, he notes how durable Xian's structure is. After focusing on the wall, he realizes that Xian has created it by layering over 40 defensive magic circles to strengthen its protection. Suddenly, Kunan turns around to Mirika and sits down for some tea. He asks her to wait for Xian since he's confident he can destroy the wall in an instant. After a while, Xian wakes up on the comfy bed and realizes he wasted too much time. Kunan informs him that he slept for a whole 2 hours, so Xian gets up to inspect his progress. Seeing the earthen wall unharmed, he thinks that Kunan has given up on destroying it. However, Kunan asks him for permission to destroy the wall, so Xian nods curiously. Soon, Kunan uses the water spell he used to clean Ika's laundry, which surrounds the earth wall with bubbles. Kunan explains that even though the wall is tough, it's made out of a substance similar to dirt, which becomes fragile once it absorbs enough water. Xian wonders why he chose the washing spell to break it, so Kunan explains it's simply easier to clean up. After his explanation, Xian approves of Kunan's methods. He notes that even though Kunan specializes in a different water spell, he chose the perfect method for his situation. Kunan hears this praise and thinks he is finally worthy to be his student, but Xian warns him not to get ahead of himself. In the end, he formally accepts Kunan as his student. Kunan gets ecstatic and starts celebrating his victory with Mirika, but Xian reminds him to pay attention to him. He informs Kunan that he'll teach him a million new spells and have him help out with his research, which will help him rise through the ranks as a pro sorcerer. However, he points out that this will leave Mirika behind since Kunan's status will soon surpass hers. He asks Mirika what she plans to do next, so the princess falls falls into thought. Knowing Xian is right, she wonders if she'll ever be worthy of being Kunan's wife. Luckily, Kunan steps in and asks Xian to stop bullying his fiancée. He points out that Xian loves bullying girls because he's too awkward around them, which hits a sore spot. He then doubles down and claims that Xian is the type of guy to lose his girl because he's too shy to admit his feelings, which finally takes Xian's focus away from Mirika. Later at night, Mirika stays up in her room, deciding to take action for the sake of her future with Kunan. The next day, Zenon returns to Kunan's house with a smug face. Kunan happily greets his master, filled with respect for his incredible skill and teaching talent. Zenon warns Kunan that he won't hold back at all during their lessons, but Kunan reassures him that his body is ready. He requests his master to give him his hardest lessons, excited to practice the most complicated magical skills under the guidance of an expert wizard like him. However, a few hours later, Kunan simply ends up as a human printer, creating copies of magic techniques for his master. He asks Zenon if he stopped loving him, but Zenon reminds him that he never loved him at all. He then reveals that the documents he's working on are state secrets, so nobody else is allowed to see them. After kicking everyone out of the room with this excuse, Zenon shyly asks Kunan to make him a water bubble mattress. As he happily snoozes away on the soft bed, Kunan gets to work on the documents. Meanwhile, Aiko offers to prepare some tea for Mirika, and in return, Mirika asks the maid to assist her with her swordsmanship training. Mirika explains that she recently started swordsmanship, so she needs a partner to practice her moves with. She then warns Aiko to keep her training a secret from Kunan before leaving to spar with Dario. As they exchange blows, Dario knocks out Mirika's sword from her hand. However, she picks it back up, determined to keep going and become a better partner for Kunan. Meanwhile, back in Kunan's room, he finds a strange diagram among Zenon's documents. While he wonders what the diagram represents, Zenon wakes up and asks if he's finished with the work. Kunan responds that he's only halfway done, so Zenon mocks him for being so slow. Kunan refuses to take the unnecessary criticism and points out that Zenon's handwriting is hard to read because it looks like he dipped an earthworm in ink to write it. Zenon shamelessly refuses to take the blame, so Kunan tells him that he'll start charging money for his tedious work. Finally, Zenon reminds him that copying the magical texts is also a part of his training, so he should stop complaining. He reminds Kunan that if he kept reading spells from clean books, it would never help him retain the information as effectively as analyzing it and writing it down by himself. Hearing this, Kunan admits that Zenon is wise and thanks him for the lesson. Afterward, Zenon starts leaving for the Black Tower, so Kunan asks him about the strange diagram he saw. Zenon thinks about it for a bit before saying that he'll demonstrate in person during their next lesson. Since the next lesson will be at the Black Tower, Kunan feels happy that he'll get to see Mirika there again, but Zenon reminds him to stay focused. A few days later, Kunan visits the tower for his next lesson. There, all the other royal mages surround him, but Zenon proudly approaches them to assert his dominance. He reminds everyone that Kunan is his student and takes him away to a certain room. At once, all the sorcerers try to stop them, so Zenon orders Kunan to knock them out with his water mattresses. Once everyone is asleep on the fluffy beds, they head inside to begin their magic lesson. As Kunan and Zenon walk together, Zenon asks his student if he knows about magic tools. Kunan says that magic tools are devices operated using a sorcerer's power. So Zenon nods and adds that the creators of such tools are called magical engineers. After some walking, they enter Zenon's room, where Kuno finds a huge pile of his teacher's notes. He picks up some of the notes and instantly falls in love with the rich, magical knowledge contained within. Kunan asks Zenon for permission to live in his room, but Zenon tells him he'll get to use all of it without needing to live there anyway. He then picks up a box and gives it to Kunan, explaining that he's working on a magical tool that can prepare a cooked meal from the comfort of one's room. Zenon explains that although he's good at creating bigger shapes with his earth magic, the finer details of an advanced device are hard to perfect. Kunan wonders if he can create the softer parts with his water magic, so Zenon admits that he was planning on making him try it. He tells tells Kunan that he'll soon get to work with him on his prototypes, so Kunan feels excited for the future. Suddenly, Londamon bursts into the room to meet Kunan. Kunan respectfully returns the Grandmaster's greeting, after which Londamon asks if he would like to talk about magic together over lunch. Unfortunately for Londamon, Zenon is quite the jealous teacher, so he puts him to sleep with Kunan's waterbed. After that, Zenon goes back to discussing his magic tool with Kunan. A little while later, Kunan goes to the cafeteria to have some lunch during his break. While he chomps away at a sandwich, Victo asks him if he'd like to switch teachers. Kunan explains that although Zenon works him even harder than a slave, he is still an excellent teacher. While the other magicians get angry at this information, Kunan also tells them that his water magic synergizes well with Zenon's earth magic. He tries to praise his master even more, but Zenon stops him before he can make him the enemy of all the royal mages. However, Kunan thinks that Zenon is just a shy tsundere, so he suggests showing off their close relationship even more. Finally, Zenon explains that Kunan is endangering his teacher's safety by making the other teachers jealous, so he stops glazing him. Kunan then turns to Reisha and asks her about Mirika's whereabouts. Reisha explains that Mirika is at the orientation ceremony for senior students in the Royal Academy, so she cannot meet him for now. Kunan realizes that Mirika has already progressed to her higher studies. Londamon asks him what he plans to do in the future, so Kunan considers taking his graduation exam as well. Londamon clarifies that he was talking about the magic school, where all the noble sorcerers come for learning. He tells Kunan that the magic school holds great opportunities for him, and Zenon asks his student to consider it well before switching schools. Kunan nods and carefully wonders if he wants to continue in the normal academy or switch to the magic school. 2 years later, after a lot of magic training, Kunan stands up against Zenon for his entrance exam. He creates a water circle using his magic. Zenon responds by creating a cluster of earth spikes and sends them forward to attack. In response, Kunan uses a 55-layer compound spell that combines layers of bubble magic, which creates a tsunami that wipes out all of the incoming earth spikes. After Kunan successfully defends his attack, Zenon smiles and praises him for passing the test. Afterward, everyone heads into the mansion to have lunch. Mirika cooks some waffles in Zenon's new magic tool, surprised by how convenient it is. Kunan explains that Zenon's recent tool has been quite the hit in the country, but all of the earnings go directly to his master. He wonders why Zenon still refuses to pay him for his contributions, so Zenon acts like he already did him a huge favor by letting him work on such an amazing project for free. Then, Aiko offers to support Kunan's finances as his loving maid, so Kunan points out that his life sounds like a struggling actor's. Aiko gets into the play as well and wonders if Kunan will abandon her after making it big, so he insincerely promises to marry her one day. As Aiko points out how fake he sounded, Mirika laughs at their closeness, while Zenon feels weirded out. After lunch, Mirika wonders how many projects Kunan has completed with Zenon. Kunan explains that they've created 7 magic tools, written 5 research papers on magic theory, and also wrote a manual on magic experimentation. Then, Kunan reveals that they're working on yet another magic tool, but Zenon tells him that he'll handle all the work from now on. Kunan reminds him that they still need to finish the magic insect box first, but Zenon remains firm. He points out that Kunan is already turning 12, so it's time for him to attempt the exam for the Royal Magic School. Hearing this, Kunan goes silent before saying that he doesn't want to attend the magic school. Zenon wonders why, so Kunan explains that he can already learn the best magic from his beloved teacher. However, Zenon reminds him that he has already completed most of the projects he was working on. Kunan wonders if he's going to get abandoned after doing all of the dirty work, but Zenon points out that he simply cannot teach him how to advance his water magic since he's an earth magician himself. He also says that the magic school could have an incredibly talented water magic teacher, so Kunan shouldn't limit him to just staying with his teacher forever. As Zenon points out all the benefits of studying under a 3 or 4-star water magician, Kunan grows silent. He still tries to protest, but this time, he knows Zenon is right. Seeing him in pain, Mirika rushes to comfort Kunan. She also supports Kunan and encourages him to attend the magic school, saying that she'll do her best to become a woman worthy of being his wife. With Mirika's support, Kunan finally smiles and accepts Zenon's advice. After making his decision, he asks Zenon where the magic school is, when Zenon tells him that the school is 100 miles away from his house. house. Kunan almost changes his mind again, but luckily, his teacher kicks him out before he can turn back. Afterward, Zenon prepares to return to the tower, and Kunan asks him how he should prepare for his trip to the magic school. He wonders if he should prepare a whole bunch of extra clothes and bedding, but Zenon thinks he's got something much more useful. Kunan wonders if he's referring to his excellent sense of humor, but Zenon lets out a sigh and clarifies that he was actually talking about Kunan's noble goal of creating a new pair of eyes. With this final advice, he leaves in his carriage, leaving Kunan with a renewed motivation. Kunan rushes back into his room and immediately takes his pen out, wondering how he forgot the main reason why he started learning magic in the first place. He takes out a paper and begins writing on it, recalling how many things he has learnt to do without his eyes during his magic journey. Somewhere along the process, he got so used to living blind that he forgot his original desire to create a pair of eyes for himself. This time, he feels determined to see his original goal to the end. Meanwhile, in the carriage, Mirika starts bawling since she doesn't want to let Kunan go. Zenon taunts her for acting so tough when they were with Kunan, so she kicks him in the leg. Then, Mirika thinks about Kunan's goal to create a pair of eyes. If Kunan manages to achieve it, she thinks that he'll gain so much prestige that she'll be left forever behind as a mediocre wife. After thinking about it, she realizes that she wouldn't mind if Kunan remained blind forever. Mirika confesses her insecurities to Dario, admitting that she's a despicable person for thinking this way. Zenon shamelessly interjects and agrees with her, so she shuts him up with another kick. Dario also gets tired of Zenon's snarky remarks, so he warns him to tone it down. He then focuses on Mirika and tells her that she isn't a bad person for having selfish desires. However, he warns her not to give in to her selfish desires or completely sacrifice herself for someone else. Instead, he thinks she should find the middle path and do something that will satisfy both her and Kunan. He reassures Mirika that she'll be fine with all the training she has done, so she finally regains some confidence. Watching this, Zenon thinks that Dario is way too soft on Mirika. However, Dario thinks that Zenon is too harsh on Kunan instead, so Zenon reminds him about all the complicated magic theories and spells he has taught Kunan. Dario points out that none of those fancy spells can create new eyes, so Zenon admits that he doesn't know how to do that either. However, he thinks that Kunan has gained a new foundation of magic for him, and holds faith that his student can achieve the impossible. A few days later, Kunan performs some experiments to make new eyes. He creates reflective water bubbles that act like a mirror and multiples those bubbles in the thousands. Although Kunan knows that the eyes of other creatures act similarly to these bubbles, he doesn't feel them working for himself. He then tries a bunch of other bubble and reflective magic variations to see if something else works. After hours of hard work, he collapses on the floor with nothing but failed results. Exhausted, Kunan decides to unwind by taking a nice, hot sauna. He invites his older brother, Ixio, to join him. Ixio asks their dad to relax with them as well. Despite it being so late, both men happily agree to join Kunan. Arsen goes a step further and invites Kunan's mom as well, so they all have a great time as a family. Seeing that Kunan is tired enough to take a sauna, Ixio wonders what kind of brutal experiments he was trying out. Kunan explains that he was trying his greatest experiment, so they realize that he's talking about his eyes. Arsen wonders if he has made any progress, but Kunan admits that he's not even close to finishing them. Still, Ixio pats his shoulder and offers his full support, and Arsen does the same for his precious son. The next day, as Kunan has lunch, he feels glad that all his friends and family are so supportive of him, wishing to see all their kind faces. He continues his learning at the Black Tower and at home. One day, Kunan creates a water mirror as a core, before covering it with a fine sand that can detect changes in the mirror's surroundings. With the sensory feedback from the fine sand, Kunan directs the information from the water mirror to flow into his mind. This time, with a working model, he opens his eyes, allowing him to see the world for the first time in his life. Realizing that he has achieved his life's goal, Kunan feels overjoyed and sheds tears of happiness. He walks towards his window to look at the outside world. However, he finds something strange in the window's reflection, so he turns around to look at it. Behind him, Kunan finds a massive shelled creature towering over him like a prehistoric giant. A few minutes after this incident, Kunan creates a mirror with his water magic. Before opening his eyes to look inside, he thinks about the first person he had ever wanted to see, himself. Ever since his childhood, he has hated that he was so dependent on everyone and unable to stand on his own feet. After hurting the people around him again and again, Kunan began to hate himself. So he decided that he'd be the very first person he'd lay eyes on. And now, he stands in front of a mirror with his oldest wish granted, a pair of eyes he can use to look at himself. When he finally opens them, Kunan is surprised by his own image at first. He carefully inspects his own features and decides that he looks like an average boy his age. Although he used to wonder what it'd be like to see himself, he now finds himself unable to feel anything except mild disappointment. He then turns around and asks the massive crab behind him for his opinion, and asks who it really is. After a moment of silence, Kunan voices his intrusive thoughts, wondering if the ugly shellfish is Aiko's true form. However, the real Aiko quickly barges into the room after hearing her name, which startles Kunan so much that he jumps into the crab. For some reason, Kunan's body passes through the crab, so he realizes that it's an immaterial creature. He then turns around to look at Aiko. After observing her for a bit, he asks Aiko if she has a braid, so she nods. Then, as he compliments her clean outfit, she tears up from joy, realizing that her master can actually see her. Overjoyed, she catches Kunan in a bear hug, which sends his magic eyeball flying. Aiko realizes her mistake and calms down and suggests holding a feast to celebrate his success. Kunan remains silent and looks back at the crab, wondering if shellfish meat would be appropriate for this occasion. Then, he suddenly notices a strange horn on Aiko's head and asks if she really has one. Instead of answering seriously, Aiko acts like she's a demon who only shows her horns when she's angry, so Kunan realizes it's a joke. Afterward, he steps out of the building to visit his father's mansion. As Kunan looks at the scenery of the open world, the gloomy sight that awaits him leaves him terrified. Behind him, Aiko gives him a coat to wear for the cold. She happily starts leading him towards the mansion, but Kunan asks her if she truly can't see the crab behind him. After confirming that she can't see it, he refuses to elaborate and follows her to the mansion. There, Kunan's mom and Ikshyo both greet him. While the two of them feel overjoyed, Kunan is unnerved by a strange pair of black wings on Ikshyo and his mother's multicolored eyes. Kunan thinks that his mom looks like the female lead of some kind of anime, but she misunderstands his compliment and thinks she looks like a pretty princess. Then, Ikshyo asks Kunan if he also looks like a main character, so Kunan nods and wonders if he was born to a couple of fallen angels. Ikshyo reminds him that they both have the same parents, so Kunan quietly asks Aiko if humans can somehow inherit wings from their parents. Once again, she gives him a useless joke answer, so Kunan wonders why he's seeing so many strange things that other people can't detect. Then, as he wonders what his dad looks like, Arson soon enters the room, looking like some kind of living ghost. Unaware of their son's troubles, Kunan's family keeps celebrating his achievement and starts planning a grand feast. Both his parents and Aiko leave to begin the preparation, so Kunan quietly asks Ikshyo if their dad looks like some fog creature. Ikshyo tells him to never say this out loud, so Kunan finally decides to consult his magic teachers for this issue. Meanwhile, in the Black Tower, Xion is working on his magic spells when Victo asks to enter his room. After coming inside, he mocks Xion for acting like he's some kind of busy authority, so Xion shuts him up with a dart. Then, Victo gets serious and informs Xion that the king has allowed him to leave the tower. He explains that this permission was granted because of Kunan's new achievement, which causes Xion to smile. Afterward, he leaves the Black Tower with Mirika to visit Kunan at his mansion. There, Mirika rushes to greet Kunan with excitement. She takes a look at his magic eye and wonders what it's called, so Kunan tells her that he calls it the glass eye. Mirika then notices that Kunan's real eyes are still closed, so she asks him to open them and look at her. Although Kunan feels nervous about seeing his fiancée for the first time, he agrees to her request. After nervously stammering out how much he has wanted to see her, he finally opens his eyes. Kunan is surprised to see that Mirika looks like a normal girl, but soon, he starts admiring her beauty. Unfortunately, a comically large feather on top of her head ruins the view, so Kunan looks away. Mirika wonders if he doesn't find her attractive, but Kunan reassures her that she looks great. In his haste to fix the misunderstanding, he mentions the feather by accident, so Mirika gets confused. Luckily for Kunan, Aiko starts yapping about how wings represent the freedom and spirit of a person. making it look like Kunan was giving her a deep compliment. Aiko's yapping changes the topic, so when Dario comes in to congratulate Kunan, he focuses on observing his appearance. Kunan asks Dario to see his sword, so the knight captain shows him. As expected, Dario is unable to see the mystical greatsword behind him, so Kunan realizes it's another immaterial image. Before long, Xian arrives at the scene as well, glowing intensely, almost like an actual star lighting up everything around him. In fact, Xian's radiance is so bright that Kunan is unable to directly look at him, so he asks his master for a private conversation. Inside the house, Xian bursts into laughter after finding out about Kunan's situation. Despite Kunan's protests, he refuses to take his condition seriously and laughs at the descriptions of all the strange things he's seeing. Kunan feels worried for his future, so Xian finally stops mocking him and takes the problem seriously. After thinking about it, he decides to tease Kunan a little further. Xian acts as if he has always been a shining star his entire life, so it's completely normal to look like one. He taunts Kunan to take a closer look, but his poor student refuses to get blinded. Xian then suggests two explanations for Kunan's issues. First, he thinks that Kunan might be sensitive because of his magic abilities, so it's possible that he's seeing everyone's souls. Kunan feels weirded out by this, so Xian suggests that it's possible he's experiencing some magic hallucinations. He reveals that many spots of the world get infected by an excess amount of mana, which can cause a sensitive magic user to get sick. During one of his adventures, Xian encountered a certain forest, which caused him magical hallucinations similar to what Kunan is seeing now. Hearing this, Kunan wonders if Xian's immaterial hallucinations were the same as his. Xian tells him that there's no way to confirm it without testing his sight properly. Kunan wonders if he should even continue experimenting with his magic, since it could simply be a failure. However, Xian encourages him to keep going, saying that he believes in his abilities. Xian also points out that many creatures out there are unable to see the world differently, so Kunan's style of seeing cannot be called right or wrong either. He thinks that Kunan should be proud of his unique vision since it could be showing him some important details. With his master's encouragement, Kunan decides to keep his glass eye. Still, Xian warns him to stop discussing his hallucinations with other people before he finds the real explanation. Kunan smiles, happy with his master's advice. Meanwhile, outside the house, Mirika wonders why Kunan's meeting with Xian is taking so long. Aiko reminds her that completing his first magic eye is a pretty big deal, so Kunan most likely has a lot of questions. Mirika nods and remembers that Kunan's birthday is coming up soon. She asks Aiko what kind of gift he'd like, but Aiko thinks that he'd love any gift as long as she gets it for him. Hearing that she can have such an effect on Kunan, Mirika gets flustered. After a few minutes, Kunan comes out of the house after finishing his discussion with Xian. As Mirika rushes to greet him, Xian starts giggling at the idea of a giant feather sticking out of her head. Mirika feels confused, so Kunan waves off his master's behavior and asks her what she was discussing with Aiko. However, Aiko points out that it was a private conversation, so Mirika agrees and refuses to share it with Kunan. A few days later, Kunan asks Aiko to help him clean his room. She helps him sort all of the magic books he was reading, wondering what he's going to do with them. Kunan explains that he has finished all the books, so he's going to return them to the library. Once she's done sorting out all the books, Aiko notes that Kunan's room looks much bigger. A little while later, they all head to their family's dining room to celebrate Kunan's birthday. As everyone wishes him a happy birthday, Kunan thanks them all for their well wishes. Arsen gifts him a new walking cane, so Kunan thanks him again. Then, his mom gives him a brand new quill for his magic studies. After Kunan accepts her gift, Ixio presents his own. Kunan wonders why he decided to give him a food book, so Ixio explains that he wanted him to check out all the restaurants on the way to the magic school. At the mention of the magic school, though, everyone realizes that Kunan is about to go somewhere far away, which ruins the happy atmosphere. Kunan's mother begins to cry, so Ixio and Arsen both rush to comfort her. Arsen then reminds everyone to focus on the happy occasion, so they all nod and enjoy a big feast. After dinner, Mirika stands on a balcony with Kunan. She asks Kunan if he's ready for his upcoming trip, and he confirms it, saying that he's almost finished with his preparations. Mirika explains that she has school on the day he leaves, so she can't come to send him off. Kunan reassures her that he doesn't mind, so Mirika nods and gives him her birthday gift. Kunan asks for her permission before opening it up. Once he opens it, he puts on the bracelet bracelet and thanks Mirka for her thoughtfulness. She smiles and shows him a matching bracelet that she got for herself. Kunan takes this chance to praise her for her thoughtfulness, while Mirka tells him to remember her with the bracelet anytime he gets lonely in the magic school. Then, Kunan promises that he'll write letters to her while he's away, and Mirka promises to respond to them. He also promises that he'll return to her one day, so Mirka tells him she'll be patiently waiting. Finally, Kunan wishes her the best before they both part ways. A few days later, it's finally time for Kunan to leave for the magic school. As the carriage awaits outside their mansion, everyone waits in a line to send off the young master. Kunan's mother tears up from emotion, so Arsen reminds her to stay strong for their son. She agrees, hoping to give her son some strength when he's feeling so nervous. However, when Kunan finally steps out of the house, he casually strolls straight into the carriage like nothing is happening. At this, Kunan's family wonders if he even loves them, but Aiko ignores them and joins him on the carriage in the same fashion. They all realize that Kunan picked up his carefree behavior from his strange maid before wishing him all the best. Soon, Kunan's carriage leaves, and everyone goes back to their normal lives. Somewhere else in a village, a young boy rushes to catch his own carriage to an unknown destination. Meanwhile, in an unfamiliar church, a sister asks a young saint called Reyes to get ready for her departure to the magic school. A few days later, as Kunan's carriage goes along its way, Aiko asks him how long it'll take to arrive at the magic school. Upon learning that they've still got a month to go, Aiko feels bored with the long journey ahead. Kunan then reminds her that they'll stop by his grandfather's house in the middle, before asking if they'll say goodbye soon. Aiko nods, saying that she wants to get married, which won't be possible if she remains by his side as a maid forever. Kunan wonders if there's no way to keep her around, so Aiko asks him to ditch Mirka and marry her instead. Of course, he remains silent at her offer, so Aiko changes the subject and focuses on the mansion coming up. After some time, they pull up at the mansion, where Aiko and Kunan dismount the carriage. Standing at the entrance, Kunan recalls the time he visited the mansion 4 years ago. He wonders why he bothered coming here back then, so Aiko reminds him that he dragged his entire family over just to check a rumored magic library in the area. Soon, Kunan's grandpa, Regent, breaks out of the main doors. Kunan instantly returns his grandfather's enthusiasm and rushes towards him for a hug, but he realizes that Granddaddy Dearest may have some demon horns on his head. After pulling back from the hug, Regent asks Kunan how his mom is doing, so he responds that she's gotten strong enough to defeat even him. Instead of being offended, Regent rolls with the disrespect and instead asks Kunan what he'd like as a gift to celebrate his admission into the magic school. While Regent offers all of the world's riches to his young grandson, Aiko politely hands him a letter from Kunan's mom. After reading the letter, Regent feels upset that he got his gift budget limited to a measly $1 million. Kunan reminds the old man that he doesn't need such an expensive gift anyway, but Regent still wonders if he can sneak a really expensive gift past his mom's detection sensors. However, Kunan changes the topic and reminds him that he's here to leave off Aiko and get her replacement. Regent nods and leaves before returning with a young girl called Rinko. Rinko openly introduces herself, admitting that she only took the maid job because it's paying her enough to save money for her dream shop and wedding. Seeing her straightforward nature, Kunan realizes that Rinko truly is Aiko's little sister. She smiles and explains that Aiko was the one who recommended the maid job to her, before proudly boasting that she's already engaged, unlike her old hag big sister. Aiko wonders why Rinko is bringing this up, so she explains that she was only setting a boundary with Kunan. Kunan reassures Rinko that he won't do anything to stain her honor since he's got a fiancé of his own. He asks Rinko to remain in contact with her fiancé while working for him, and she gladly accepts his offer. Rinko reveals that she wants to open her shop with her future husband, so she's looking forward to making the money for it. Kunan chuckles, pleased that the younger sister has a sense of humor just like her older sis. After his introduction to Rinko, Kunan settles down at the dining table to have lunch. As he waits for the two maids to set up the table, Rinko admits to Aiko that she wasn't expecting Kunan to be so easygoing as someone with a hero's scar. Aiko gives her some advice to keep him under control, saying that Kunan remains tame as long as he's well fed. Rinko nods and thinks about making Kunan's favorite dishes for him, so Aiko thinks she'll find it easy to adjust to her new master. She then closes her eyes, recalling the first time she learnt about Kunan. Back then, Kunan's parents wanted her to serve him since she was was a mature girl who was still young enough to bond with him. As Aiko started spending her days with Kunon, she gradually taught him about all the objects around him, helping him adjust to his environment without his sight. As time went on, Kunon became more and more independent, until he finally created his artificial set of eyes. In the present, Aiko thinks he's more than ready to live on his own. However, Kunon doesn't think so, since he feels like he'll be lonely with her gone. Realizing this, Aiko warns Rinko that Kunon is still a lonely child, so she should be careful about her behavior around him. For some reason, she goes completely off track and starts warning her sister not to corrupt Kunon's innocent mind. Rinko reassures Aiko that she doesn't have any naughty ideas about Kunon, but she thinks that he's an easy target for women since he's always smooth-talking them. Aiko thinks that Rinko is exaggerating, but Rinko still insists that Aiko's sense of humor and flattering compliments have turned Kunon into an unintentional rizzler. After both sisters finish arguing, Kunon bites into a sandwich they prepared for him. After just a single bite, he starts complimenting the plain sandwich's flavors as if they were a divine fusion of the sisters' cooking talents. Hearing his mushy compliment, Rinko reminds Aiko that he'll never be safe around women. Afterward, Kunon goes to sleep to prepare for another long ride. The next morning, Aiko wakes up Kunon for his journey. He gets up from bed, but asks her if she remembers what he said when Jenny and Flora left him. Kunon reminds Aiko that he never felt safe without her, and points out that he's going to the magic school without anyone else from his family to accompany him. Although he's the one who decided to go without Aiko, Kunon still wants to know if she'll still be around and available to meet him in the future. Aiko reassures him that she'll continue to work at his grandpa's mansion, so he can always see her if he ever gets lonely. Then, she points out that it'll probably be years before they can meet again, so she might already be married with a few kids by then. After saying this, Aiko gives Kunon a big hug and says one final goodbye to him. Soon after, Kunon prepares his luggage and gets on the carriage with Rinko. Regent begs him to stay behind with him, knowing his grandpa's stubborn nature. Kunon leaves on the carriage without another word, onward to a new destination. As the carriage starts moving, Kunon thanks Rinko for agreeing to serve him. He then wonders if she'll be fine without her fiancé for a few years. Rinko cheerfully tells him that her fiancé agreed to wait, since he thinks the money for their shop will be totally worth it. Kunon gets curious about the kind of shop she wants to open, so Rinko tells him that she wants a restaurant. Kunon finds her choice completely reasonable. After a few days, Kunon and Rinko get off at a small city near the magic city, Dereshik. As they walk together, Kunon notices a mysterious-looking book displayed outside a shop. Of course, the little magician's interest gets piqued, so he enters the store to admire all the books inside. Rinko wonders why he's so excited, since Regent's library was much bigger, so Kunon explains that his granddad didn't have too many books on magic. Rinko then asks if he plans on buying a few books from the store, but Kunon explains that he'll go bankrupt if he even thinks about it. It is only then that Rinko notices the outrageous price tag of 5 million NECA on one of the books. Realizing just how expensive sorcery is as a career, Kunon tells her that the price tag is justified since every magic book contains different experiences and insights from other talented magicians. However, Rinko still thinks that the books don't deserve to be worth their weight in gold. As Rinko starts arguing with Kunon, the store owner wonders if the pair is interested in her wares. Kunon explains that he can't afford the books yet, so the owner realizes he must be a student. She then asks him to demonstrate some of his magic, so Kunon creates a tiny cat for her with his water magic. The cute creature instantly wins over the girl, so Kunon wonders if she also has a talent for magic. She shakes her head, explaining that she's just a normal person passionate about the field of magic. She then sighs, thinking that bright young sorcerers like Kunon are powering Dereshik into becoming a shining paradise of magic. Kunon wonders if something that exciting is truly happening in Dereshik, so the owner reveals that the Saint of the Holy Kingdom is also enrolling in the Magic Academy this year. Recalling that Dereshik also got the Inferno Prince and Lightning Bolt sorcerers last year, she thinks that Kunon will soon join their ranks. Then, the owner offers her most precious book to Kunon for a special 50% discount. After Kunon learns that it's only a second-hand copy of Xion's book, he calmly ignores the offer and walks out like it's worthless, leaving the owner shell-shocked. Outside the store, Rinko wonders why he turned down such a steal deal. Kunon explains that he already knows the book by heart, and it was probably written down by him anyway. This confuses Rinko, but he moves on to the next door store without further explanation. There, he starts checking out all the soft fur coats, leaving the owner confused. The store owner wonders why Conan is touching his precious fur, thinking that the kid will ruin it without buying anything. Finally, after his inspection is over, Conan holds up the soft fur in triumph. The owner asks him to put the goods down, so Conan apologizes for touching them. He explains that he was only trying to memorize the texture and feel of the soft fur, which is why he touched it for so long. Conan then asks the owner which creature the fur belongs to, so he responds that it came from a rare black fox. Conan nods, then creates a black fox with his water magic, using the data he gained. Shocked, the owner finally realizes why he was so intent on giving the fur a good rub. He strokes the water fox's fur, surprised to find that it feels just like real black fox fur. The owner wonders if Conan can replicate anything with his water magic, so Conan nods, but reminds him that he can only create textures and shapes. The owner thinks about it for a moment and hesitantly asks Conan if he can replicate a woman's body. In an instant, Rinko's bodyguard mode activates, so she chews out the owner for putting such filthy ideas in an innocent child's mind. While the owner apologizes, she drags Conan out of the store to prevent his innocence from being corrupted. Even still, the owner admits that he only wanted some contact with a woman he admires, so Rinko returns to scold him once more. Finally, Rinko walks away from the store and tells Conan they should visit Durashik now. In that moment, the saint and her friends walk out from a nearby alley. The girls enter the store and ask the owner about his rumored fox fur scarf. Then, the saint notices the small black fox in the owner's arms. The girls wonder how he got such a rare creature to trust him, so the saint points out it's just a magic spell. She then pops the water fox, which creates a big wet splotch on the owner's pants. Ignoring the poor man's humiliation, all of the church girls get interested in this strange magic. The saint realizes that despite looking so lifelike, the black fox was only made with a small amount of magical power, and she wonders what kind of talented mage could cast such a spell. A few days later, Conan and Rinko arrive at the magic city of Durashik. Rinko is the first to exit their carriage, and she happily announces that they've arrived at their destination. Conan nods and gets off the carriage, laying his eyes on the famous magic school for the first time. Rinko reminds Conan to just get some rest since they've just arrived in the city. Conan recalls that the magic school has a dorm system. Since every student can have an attendant with them, he thinks Rinko will have no trouble living with them. However, when they actually go inside the school, the receptionist, Laubella, explains that the school dorms are already full. Hearing this, Conan realizes that Xion left this information out when he was filling out the admission forms. Meanwhile, back at the Black Tower, Xion breaks into Londemon's room in a bold entrance. The Grand Sorcerer wonders if Xion has something serious to say, so Xion informs him that he wants something for his beloved student. Back in Durashik, Conan wonders what to do about his housing situation. Rinko points out that they can simply rent a hotel with all the money he has, but Conan thinks about renting a house together so they can save some money. Then, Laubella follows them out and gives them a pamphlet full of real estate ads for students struggling to find accommodation. With the guidance from the pamphlet, Conan and Rinko find a suitable house to stay in during their school years. Meanwhile, in a mysterious room, two mages enter the dimension from outside. One of them presents a list of the top students enrolled at the magic school, saying that a few of them have the potential to take the advanced class. A powerful mage accepts the list from him before focusing on Conan's profile. The mage explains that Conan is Xion's student, which catches the mysterious man's interest. Back in the Magic Academy, Laubella takes Conan to his entrance exam grounds. On their way, Conan keeps complimenting her, which weirds out the poor woman. Soon, he makes it to the testing grounds, where all of the other top applications get shocked by his strange blindfold. Meanwhile, Kuno observes the three students' auras and sees all kinds of unique phenomena surrounding them. Although the two boys extend a friendly greeting to him, Conan doesn't pay them much mind. Instead, he walks straight to the saint, Reyes, and starts examining her for her light attribute. As Conan gets in the girl's face, she feels offended by how familiar he's acting. Conan fails to realize his creepy behavior and asks her some questions about the light attribute, so the saint tells him to back off from her. Still, he stubbornly refuses to do so and continues pestering her to teach him about all the unique abilities she has. However, Reyes wonders what he'll do after learning about light magic, since she doesn't think Conan can actually use it. She claims that light magic is superior to all other magic types, so there's no way Conan can learn it as an inferior superior water user. Behind, the other boys remind the saint that all magics were created equal, thinking that she hurt their feelings. Reyes tells the boys that they shouldn't mind her words since she cannot feel emotions like normal people. The boys wonder how it's possible to be emotionless, so Reyes explains that she's a hero's scar. Hearing this, Kunan gets even more interested in her abilities and asks her once more to show him. As Reyes continues to ignore him, the examiners, called Soph and Seifi, finally show up on the ground. Kunan immediately shifts his attention to Soph, seeing a powerful aura surrounding him. Then, Soph introduces himself as the main examiner and Seifi as his assistant, before congratulating all the students for getting enrolled into the academy. This surprises the kids, since they were expecting to be enrolled after taking the exam. So Soph explains that the Durashik school accepts any proper sorcerers without requiring an exam. The kids point out that they had never heard of this rule before, so Soph reveals that the information is kept secret. Kunan feels disappointed since he had studied so much for the exam, but Soph tells him that he'll still get to attempt it. He explains that the Durashik school has 3 levels of classes, starting from the fundamentals class for absolute beginners, going up to the teacher-assisted second level, where students are taught magic through a proper curriculum. Finally, the school has the advanced class, where students are free to perform research on their own, like normal PhD professors. In the advanced class, a student can either research existing magic spells, create their own, work on magic tools with their professors, or do whatever else they wish. Hearing this, Kunan immediately sets his sights on the advanced class. However, Soph warns that the advanced class is only available to the cream of the crop, so the students need to get incredible results on the exam to qualify for it. Then, he also reveals that all 4 students here are gathered for the advanced class's exam, since their teachers personally recommended them based on their abilities. Kunan gets excited about the exam again, which makes Seifi quietly gnash her teeth. Ignoring her outburst, Soph tells the kids to get ready for a practical test. After lining all the kids up, he asks them to step forward one by one and display their magic abilities. First, the boy called Hank steps up and reveals that he's a 2-star fire sorcerer who can use 7 magic spells. Soph tells Hank to show his best spell, so he pulls out his wand and casts an elementary fire spell. Hank's fire races out of his wand and starts running around in circles, creating a perfect spiral pattern on the ground. Soph praises Hank for his incredible control over the fire magic, and Seifi notes down his results. Next, the boy called Rhea comes forward and announces that he's a 2-star wind sorcerer who can use 8 different spells. Then, he tells everyone to step away to avoid hurting them with his spell demonstration. After everyone else steps away, Rhea casts his wind spell, which gathers a big chunk of wind mana from the surroundings before condensing it into a singular wind ball. Finally, Rhea launches the wind ball towards the ground, which creates a big crater where it hits. Kunan notes that the wind ball is an intermediate level wind spell, so it requires much more mana to use than Hank's basic fire spell. After that, Reyes steps forward and introduces herself as a 3-star light sorcerer who can use 5 different spells. Reyes explains that although she specialized in healing, she can't show off her best spell since no one present is injured. Instead, she decides to show an offensive light ray spell, which covers the entire ground in an instant. Shocked, Kunan is amazed by her abilities since he can't see a way to dodge the spell after it has been cast. Finally, it's Kunan's turn to prove his abilities. He steps up in front of the teachers and introduces himself as a 2-star water mage who can use only 2 spells. Hearing this, Soph gets surprised. Since he was told that Kunan was the most talented student of this bunch, he shows Kunan 2 letters of recommendation, one from Master Londemont himself, and the other from Kunan's teacher, Xian. Hearing Xian's name, both Hank and Rhea are surprised that Kunan is the student of such an incredible master. As Seifi quietly scoffs at Xian's name, Kunan asks Soph if he personally knows Xian. Soph explains that Xian is quite the sensation in the sorcerer's world, so basically every magician in the country knows about him. He also reveals that Xian sent him a challenge letter, ordering him to make Kunan's exam incredibly difficult, just to show off his abilities. Kunan accepts the challenge, but Seifi gets offended that he's being so casual about the special treatment. Thinking that Kunan has become a pretentious man under Xian's influence, she thinks that Soph should thoroughly humiliate him in the exam and send him home. Kunan wonders if she's so angry because of Xian, but Seifi denies holding any grudges against him. Soph interrupts them and announces the beginning beginning of Kunan's test, so he looks back and tells Reyes to watch closely. Soph reminds Kunan to focus on his own exam before casting a wind barrier around his own body. After the strong wind barrier surrounds him, Soph challenges Kunan to defeat the spell. Rhea notes that the wind barrier is an intermediate level spell that provides a completely seal-tight defense, since Kunan's element is water. Any water droplets from his spell will be scattered by the powerful winds, so there's no way he can defeat Soph. Soph wonders how Kunan will pass this test since he can only use 2 water spells, but suddenly, Kunan asks why he's going easy on him. He thinks that the exam should be a bit harder, but Soph tells him to pass the initial test first instead of talking so big. Soph's taunt finally pushes Kunan to give it his all, and he starts by casting his water bubble spell. Although the spell creates dozens of water bubbles in the air, Soph reminds Kunan that he can't break through his wind barrier with just a bubble bath. Instead of being discouraged, Kunan remains focused on his spell and orders all the bubbles to multiply. Soon, the water bubbles multiply exponentially, creating a thick wall of bubble mist. Once the mist has completely surrounded Soph, Kunan gives all of it a red color. Soph realizes that he has been surrounded, but he still thinks he's safe inside the wind barrier. However, Kunan doesn't do anything else. Instead, he simply creates a water chair for himself and acts like the test is already over. He points out that he can maintain the mist barrier for over 2 days, but there's no way Soph can hold up his powerful wind barrier without running out of mana. As Kunan sits on the chair, he reminds Soph that there was no time limit for his test, so he's prepared to wait the full 2 days. Soph smiles, knowing that Kunan has intelligently defeated him by choosing a less exhausting magic spell. Knowing that the red mist will defeat him one way or the other, he raises his hands in surrender. Kunan jumps up from his seat, happy to have passed. He then dispels the red mist around Soph, who also dispels his own wind barrier. Seeing how easily Kunan defeated him, Soph internally admits that Xion's student is quite frightening. Meanwhile, Kunan goes up to Reyes, trying to get in her good graces, while Seifi struggles to accept reality. Afterward, Laubella comes over to remind Soph that he's running out of time, but the giant blood lake from Kunan's red mist leaves her horrified. Some time later, Kunan and the other students wait for their final assessment in a classroom. There, Kunan asks Reyes to combine her light magic with his water magic, but she refuses to cooperate. He then tries to bribe her with dessert, so Soph tells him to stop bothering the poor girl. Soph then asks the students if they have any questions about the final assessment, so Kunan complains that Reyes keeps ignoring him. Seifi thinks Kunan should be punished for his shameless flirting, but Soph calms her down and tells Kunan to stop bothering Reyes before her assessment. Kunan sits down, thinking that his incredible riz must have been bothering Reyes' mental state. Seifi interrupts his delusions and announces the start of the final assessment. She calls Hank over, who gets up and follows her out of the class. Kunan wonders who will conduct the final exam, so Soph explains that the questions and examiners change each time. Kunan wonders if he'll be interrogated about his preference in women, but Soph ignores his uncomfortable question. Then, Kunan asks Soph if he can answer some questions about wind magic, since he's an expert wind user himself. As Soph agrees to answer his questions, Seifi returns to the room and takes Rhea away for his assessment. Kunan then suddenly remembers that he'll go home after the final assessment, so he grabs Reyes and pleads for her to join the same class as him. Sometime later, Seifi comes in and takes Reyes away for her test, so Kunan is left alone with Soph. Soph curiously asks Kunan if he had another way of defeating him during the test if his battle of attrition failed. Kunan admits that he could have defeated him directly as well through a combination of erosion and interference. Soph wonders if he would have slowly eroded his wind magic through the water's interference and then disrupt the rest of his barrier after penetrating into its defenses. Kunan nods, thinking that if he somehow reached the inner layers of Soph's magic, he could have easily seized control of it. Since water has a peculiar quality of breaking through any material, he thinks that wind magic is no exception to it. Kunan then tells Soph that water is the best element in his eyes, but he cannot prove that yet since he hasn't defeated his own master, Xion. While saying this, Kunan starts walking towards the room's exit, where a returning Seifi gets surprised by him. Seifi takes him to the location of the final assessment, where she opens a room leading into a dark space. Kunan wonders what's inside, so Seifi remembers that he's actually blind. She reassures him that the room has solid ground, but offers to escort him inside if he's feeling unsafe. However, Kunan refuses her assistance and enters the room on his own. Inside, he takes out his magic eye to look at the surroundings, but finds himself surrounded by endless darkness. Judging from the cold wind around him, Kunan figures that he's most likely in an open ground with a night sky full of stars above. Suddenly, an old woman's voice rings out, and Kunan is shocked by the 7 figures who appear out of nowhere. He introduces himself to the old hag, who admits that she's interested in him since he's Xion's student. As the old lady walks closer to observe Kunan, he tells her to stay away from him since he's engaged. The old lady points out that he had been constantly flirting with Reyes, but Kunan claims that he was purely talking with her for the sake of magic. Then, the old lady wonders if he'll remain cautious around her despite her age. Kunan says that he'll remain on guard against a lady of any age, so the old lady finally respects his wishes. Then, the woman asks Kunan if he learned something new during his exam. Kunan nods, excited to learn more about all the new spells he saw. Hearing this, the old lady notes how excited he is and declares that he has qualified for the advanced class. As the old lady starts giving him advice for the future, Kunan simply celebrates his victory and runs out of the room before she can even finish. The lady sighs, recalling how happy Xion was to receive her teachings, but his student completely ignored her. Meanwhile, outside the assessment hall, Soph reads through Xion's recommendation letter once more. In the letter, Xion proudly claims that his beloved student is a 1 in a million genius who will surpass even Soph. After bragging about his student, Xion also asks Soph to look after Kunan since he's still a kid, and asks him to forgive his master's mistakes when he used to be in school. After reading the letter, Soph looks outside, where Rinko is escorting Kunan back to his room. He thinks back to Xion's words, who thinks that Kunan has the potential to become the legendary cerulean sorcerer. Meanwhile, in the dark examination space, the old hag, Grey Ruva, thinks back to Kunan's magic eye. Despite her old age and immense experience, this was the first time she saw such a unique spell. She smiles, looking forward to seeing all the new things a bright talent like him can show her. A few weeks later, Kunan's parents read out a letter from Rinko, updating them on Kunan's situation in the magic school. Although Kunan's parents feel happy that their son has gotten into the school's prestigious advanced class, Arsene gets furious after learning about his blood garden incident. To punish his son's careless behavior, he vows to cut off his allowance for an entire month. However, the magic school students soon find out that they're not allowed to receive allowances anyway, since advanced students are supposed to make their own money. Hearing this, Reyes gets up to protest. She tells her teachers that her goal is to learn magic, not learn how to be a businessman. However, Professor Soph reminds her that if she can't even learn to pay her own bills, there's no way she can become a top sorcerer. With her fate sealed, Reyes asks her classmate for help, revealing that she spends $1.5 million every month to support herself and her 2 maids. The kids wonder if she has a plan to make so much money, but Reyes admits she's got no idea. Sometime later, Seifi takes the students to their personal lab rooms, explaining that they can practice magic or perform their research in privacy. Reyes wonders if she needs to pay for the lab fee as well, but Seifi assures her that the lab is free, though the students still need to pay for their own research materials and books. Then, she warns the students that although they have the freedom to do whatever they want, if they don't earn enough class credits, they'll get kicked out of the advanced class and they'll be demoted to the 2nd level. According to Soph, class credits are points awarded by professors in recognition of their achievements, so they'll need to work hard to earn them. Once her explanation is done, Seifi wishes the students good luck, and Kunan tells her that he's already prepared. He explains that he has spent a lot of time making magic tools with Xion, so he's got quite a few business ideas in mind already. Then, Kunan thinks that Xion was incredibly lucky to get a career related to magic, and hopes that he can follow in his master's footsteps. While the other students are surprised that Kunan is thinking so deeply about the future, Kunan himself gets interested in Reyes' plans. He asks her if she's got any good ideas to make money with light magic, but Reyes refuses to discuss anything with him. Afterward, Kunan returns home and lounges around on his waterbed. Rinko informs him that dinner is ready, but she notices that Kunan is looking quite worried. Kunan explains that he's worried about Reyes since she keeps shutting him down at every chance he gets. Hearing this, Rinko takes Kunan for a class on girls. She tells him to stop being so pushy with girls since it can easily creep them out. Instead, Rinko suggests a more respectful approach and warns him to stop meeting them alone. After Kunan agrees to obey her, Rinko sighs, feeling worried for his future with the ladies. Then, she wonders if Kunan has a way to make money in school. Knowing that she's only concerned about her own salary, Kunan reassures her that he'll be able to pay her every month. Meanwhile, in Rei's room, she sits together for a meal with her maids. Both maids ask Rei about the school's restriction, knowing that their young lady has no more means to pay them. One of the maids offers to live without her salary, so Rei gets excited. However, the maid quickly backs down since she was only being polite. The other maid then points out that Rei can't use her healing magic for business, leaving them with no options for making money. The next day, in school, Rei walks through school, her back hunched with the worry of her future. In the hallway, she notices Kunan standing in front of a queue, talking to everyone in line like a professional salesman. Rei wonders what happened, so Hank informs her that Kunan just came up with a business idea that was an instant hit. Meanwhile, a girl asks Kunan for his special 1-hour course. She wonders if Kunan's services can help her cope with her lack of sleep, so Kunan quickly nods his head. Then, he calls the girl into his lab and opens the door, and informs the rest of his waiting customers that the room is booked full. Watching the scene, Rei feels impressed, and even Soph and Seifi come over to check out the commotion. After dealing with another customer, Kunan looks at his teachers, who ask him what he's doing. Kunan explains that he has created a sleeping sanctuary in his lab, where exhausted students can get a deep rest on his special water beds. Soph wonders what's so special about Kunan's beds, so he explains that these water beds are so comfortable that even Xian was forced to acknowledge them. Everyone wonders where Kunan even got the idea to monetize these beds, so he reminds them that he has also experienced countless sleepless nights working with Xian. As such, Kunan thought about all the magic students in the academy, tired and desperate for a good, short rest, and created this water bed service for them. Suddenly, Soph puts his hand on Kunan's shoulder and grimly asks him to create a water bedroom for the teachers as well. Kunan feels bad about charging his own teachers for a service, but Soph reassures him that they'll gladly pay up. After some time, Kunan's first batch of customers woke up, fully satisfied with their short rest. Sometime later, 3 beautiful girls step up to use Kunan's service, secretly interested in uncovering more about his identity. Later at night, Rei sits in her room with her maids, unable to even afford the electricity bill. One of the maids wonders if she can ask her teachers for a concession, but Rei explains that she already tried and failed to convince them. Then, they ask her if she has found a way to make money. Rei hesitates for a bit before revealing that she only has the option of asking Kunan for advice. At Kunan's name, both maids start teasing Rei for having a boyfriend. Rei claims that Kunan is only trying to work with her, so her maids ask what her other classmates think about her relationship with him. Rei admits that they all want her to work with him as well, but she feels reluctant to ask a womanizer for help. The next day, with a heavy heart, she drags herself into Kunan's lab, feeling insulted that she's asking for his help. Kunan happily offers to help her, but Rei tells him that she never wanted to, since she was afraid he'd ask her for an inappropriate favor. Kunan promises to never harass her and asks her to call Seifi into the lab. Once Seifi arrives, Kunan explains that he didn't want to be alone with a lady in case it caused any misunderstandings. Rei is impressed that he's so thoughtful, and Kunan wonders why she isn't using her healing powers to make money. Rei explains that her healing powers are a sacred responsibility from her land, so she doesn't want to abuse them for material purposes. Kunan then wonders if she can try writing magic reports for money. However, he notes that a student's research can't be as valuable as a professor's, so Rei won't be able to make too much with this work. Then, Kunan wonders about Rei's purification ability and asks if she can use it to create products. Rei agrees, so Kunan offers to create magic tools with the help of her magic. Surprised, Seifi reminds Kunan that if any of his magic tools becomes a success, he'll have to share all the profits with Rei. Kunan agrees, but he doesn't mind sharing the fruits of his work with Rei in the future. Then, he asks the saint if she's willing to work with him, and she agrees. Afterward, Kunan calls Professor Shurya into his lab, who thanks him for his waterbed service. Then, she enters the class and approaches Rei, explaining that she's also a light sorcerer. Once Shurya is inside, Seifi excuses herself and leaves the room. Shurya hands Kunan a small box containing strange seeds. As Kunan opens the box, Rei immediately recognizes the seeds as sacred shishilla herbs. Kunan explains that they'll grow shishilla in his lab, but Rei immediately refuses. She points out that shishilla can only grow in holy lands, where there is an abundance of light mana. Kunan agrees and explains that he did a lot of research on Shishila and the Holy Lands beforehand, and he found out that if ordinary soil is blessed with purification magic, it's possible to convert it into holy soil. Kunan reminds Reyes that she has a spell called Sanctum, which can achieve a similar effect, and Soraya also thinks that his hypothesis could work. Finally, Reyes agrees to try his experiment, and she clasps her hands before beginning the Sanctum spell. Soon, a warm light starts radiating from Reyes, and it covers the soil with a barrier of light. Soon enough, the Shishila seeds buried in the soil start sprouting, confirming Kunan's theory. After the spell is complete, Reyes opens her eyes. In an instant, both Soraya and Kunan start gushing over her brilliant achievement, and Kunan starts writing down everything he just observed. Watching him write notes like some kind of lab freak, Reyes finally realizes that Kunan was never trying to hit on her. Suddenly, Kunan asks her if she'd like to go out with him, so she instantly goes back to her previous opinion. She then asks him what he's going to do with the herbs she just grew, so he explains that he'll process them to make medicinal pills. He reveals that a good batch of pills made from the sacred herb could easily sell for over $1.5 million, so Reyes is surprised that he was thinking about paying her expenses. She feels impressed, since Kunan was able to make so much money with her abilities in such a short time. Kunan realizes that she's staring at him, so he starts teasing her. Reyes reminds him to stop being deluded. While Shuriya congratulates Kunan on saving his $1 million, Reyes wonders what she's talking about, so Shuriya explains that the seeds for Shishila cost around $1 million to buy. Reyes finally realizes that Kunan bought the seeds for her out of pocket, and wonders what he would have done if her magic had failed to make them grow. Kunan refuses to comment and instead thanks her for helping him with his experiments. Finally, Reyes smiles slightly and apologizes for troubling him, but Kunan thinks that a thank you would be better. Reyes agrees and thanks him for the help before they go back to growing the herbs. After a short while, the Shishila plants fully bloom. Afterward, Shuriya helps the kids grind the flowers into a medicinal paste, and Kunan creates a batch of medicinal pills with them. Once the pills are ready, they take them to a drugstore. There, the appraiser carefully observes the pills and declares that they're all worth over $2 million. As Reyes heaves a sigh of relief, Kunan takes her out to celebrate with her maids. At the restaurant, Kunan boldly offers to pay for everything, so the maids thank him and accept his generosity. Afterward, he regrets his decision since the maids made him blow a couple of $100,000 on just the food. As he walks back in the school's halls, Kunan encounters Hank and Rhea. He realizes that the boys need his help, but he tells them that he only helps women for free. Then, he asks the boys to join him for his experiments. Meanwhile, in Kunan's sleeping lab, the three girls from earlier wake up after a restful sleep. As they all catch their bearings, all three girls remain wary of the others, knowing that they're all here for Kunan. 1 month later, Kunan creates a new addition to his sleeping business, a hairless rat plushie to help his customers sleep even better. He shows off this rat to his professors, asking if they want to try out its magical effects as well. Soph refuses to avoid getting addicted to a toy, and Seifi does the same. Kunan then excuses himself from both his professors and heads back into his sleep lab. After he leaves, the professors discuss how well their students have been doing for the past month. Knowing that a month has passed, Soph thinks that certain new factions will make their moves to recruit their new students. As if to prove his point, the three beautiful girls enter Soph's room, asking for Kunan's whereabouts. Soph tells them that Kunan has already left the room, so the girls excuse themselves and leave to search for him. Meanwhile, Kunan is busy advertising his new rat plushie to his customers. It's a quick success, and all of the customers add the rat to their package before going to sleep. After Kunan dismisses them all, he smells some food being cooked in the garden. As he looks out of a window, he finds Hank trying his best to cook some bacon. Kunan goes out to help Hank with his cooking, while the three girls continue their search for him. He reminds Hank that if he keeps roasting the bacon over an open flame, it will never come out good, since bacon is supposed to be cooked on a low flame over time. Hank nods, but he explains that maintaining a constant low temperature with fire magic is quite difficult for him. Kunan remains silent, then wishes Hank good luck. Afterward, he goes to check on Rhea, who is trying to fly with his wind magic. Rhea successfully manages to lift himself off the ground, but he quickly loses control of the wind and starts falling down at an alarming speed. Luckily for him, Kunan catches him with his waterbed. Rhea thanks him for saving his life, but Kunan reminds him to practice floating first before taking off so high. Some time later, both boys are done practicing their skills, so Conan heads to the cafeteria with them. There, he asks the chef to make some sandwiches with the burnt bacon from Hank. The chef wonders if Conan can even eat such bad meat, but Conan refuses to waste any food. After getting the sandwiches, the kids head back to class to eat. On their way back, they encounter Reyes, who also joins them for lunch. Conan is ecstatic, thinking that Reyes might be interested in him. However, Reyes explains that she only joins him for lunch since he always feeds her for free. Soon, the boys take a bite out of their sandwiches, but the burnt bacon instantly ruins their experience. Then, Reyes also tries her sandwich, but she makes such a horrible face that everyone thinks she's about to puke. Meanwhile, outside of Conan's sleeping lab, the three girls decide it's the best place to wait for him. Soon enough, Conan comes back from lunch to tend to his customers. As he starts showing off to his customers, the three girls pop up to request an audience. However, the other customers waiting in line remind them to wait for their turn, so they line up all the way at the back. After waiting for the rest of the customers to enter the lab, it's finally the girls' turn to talk to Conan. They feel curious about his rat plushie, so Conan informs them that it's the key to perfect sleep. At the sight of a cute toy, the girls forget their original mission and drop like logs on Conan's waterbeds. The next day, Hank tries again to grill some bacon, recalling how Conan can easily control his magic to remain low and constant. Hank feels envious of his magic abilities. Rhea also does his best to float and slowly starts getting the hang of it. Meanwhile, Reyes is growing shishila herbs on her own. Seifi is impressed by her abilities, but Reyes asks her why their school is forcing kids to make money with magic. Seifi sighs before asking Reyes if she has done anything like this before. Knowing that kids like her have only studied and practiced magic, Seifi explains that if Reyes went out in the open world, kids like her would get scammed by shady tricksters in the streets. For this reason, the magic school forces all its students to work with magic and interact with normal society, so they can become a functioning part of it after growing up. Reyes nods, finally understanding the importance of being independent. Seifi is satisfied with her answer and hopes that Rhea and Hank can also succeed in their tasks. Reyes believes that they'll easily make it, since they've got Master Conan on their side. Seifi remembers that the school factions have started their recruitment. She wonders if anyone asked Reyes to join them, so the saint shakes her head. Then, Seifi asks if perhaps the other kids were scouted by any recruiters, but Reyes gives her the same answer. Meanwhile, in other parts of the school, some strong-looking students wonder where their recruitment partners have been slacking around all day. Afterward, Reyes gathers her classmates to discuss the recruitment drives. Conan learns that the magic school has student factions, where like-minded students help each other out. He also learns that the three strongest factions are called Harmony, Ability, and Rationality. Conan nods, but he thinks there's no need to join a faction since he likes being free. However, Hank reminds him that many experiments require assistance from other sorcerers, so joining a faction could greatly help him. Reyes chimes in, explaining that for their first month at school, the factions were forbidden from recruiting them so they could get adjusted to their new lives. Now, the restriction has been lifted, so all factions are free to scout them out. Conan wonders if he can request to join a faction he wants, so the kids nod. Then, Hank reveals that he plans to join Harmony, while Reyes and Rhea have no idea which one they should pick. As all of the kids get worried about the future, Conan reminds them to focus on lunch instead. At the mention of lunch, Hank proudly brags that he got the heat right this time. However, when everyone takes a bite of their sandwich, they still feel disgusted by the taste. Hank wonders what went wrong, so Conan tells him to pay attention to the flavor next time. Meanwhile, the three leaders of the big factions learn that Conan distracted all of their recruiters, so they head out to recruit him on their own. As they all walk through the school's halls, the three of them bump into each other. The leader of Rationality greets the other two leaders, Bale and Shido, who return his greeting. All of them declare that they're after Conan, so they decide to hold a competition to determine which of them gets to recruit him first. Back in the school's garden, Hank gets exhausted trying to perfect his cooking. Conan reminds him that he won't get paid if he keeps failing, so Hank gets up to try again. Then, Conan checks on Rhea to see how he's doing. Since Rhea is able to float on his own, Conan surrounds his body with a cushioning water bubble so he can start flying around safely. Feeling the bubble's protective cushioning, Rhea feels amazed by Conan's abilities. He recalls that back in his village, he was the most talented kid. However, now he knows that compared to a genius like Conan, he's got a long way to go. Then, Kunan snaps him out of his thoughts, so Rhea gets ready to do his best for the sake of his poor family that did its best to provide him with the world's best education. Kunan teases him, saying that he'll record everything he does, including his failures, before Rhea can react. Suddenly, an explosion rings out near the boys. In the nearby ground, the three faction masters stand against each other in a free-for-all duel. Bale starts the duel with his earth magic, saying that the ability faction is best to nourish Kunan's talents. However, Shido steps in, claiming that Kunan's abilities are best suited to the teamwork-oriented harmony faction. Finally, Lulu reminds the two of them that Kunan has studied under the genius magician Xian, so it's best for him to join rationality. As the three of them argue, Kunan watches the explosions from afar, wondering how much fun it is to fight an all-out battle. Meanwhile, Hank continues struggling with his bacon. Suddenly, Kunan pops up and asks why he isn't even cooking the meat. Hank tells him that he's trying his best to keep the temperature low, but Kunan wonders why he hasn't tried anything new. He tells Hank that a fire can have different colors and smells, so he should experiment to find out which one gives his bacon the best taste. Hank wonders if it's even possible to manipulate his fire like that, but Kunan encourages him to give it his all. Then, Soph calls out to Kunan from the window to help an exhausted professor, so he starts leaving to take care of him. Before Kunan goes, Hank asks him if he learned to be so creative from Xian, but Kunan reveals that it was his first teacher who taught him this trick. After he leaves, Hank sits back down and experiments with his flame. Using his magic, he changes the fire's color and smell, wondering which smell would be best for the bacon. Then, he gets the brilliant idea to give the fire a flavor by adding an herb smell and starts cooking the bacon with his new trick. While Hank feels like he'll succeed this time, a student from the Harmony faction asks him to join their faction. Meanwhile, Rhea struggles to fly around the school, constantly bumping into walls and roofs. After he falls from a hard crash, the girl from Rationality gives him a few tips to fly better. Afterward, Kunan and his classmates gather for lunch once more. This time, Hank's sandwiches actually taste good since he didn't burn them or cook them without any flavor. Even Reyes praises Hank's cooking, and Kunan suggests experimenting with different types of meat. Hank reveals that he already tried fish, mutton, and other meats, but Kunan points out that they can't eat them all. To solve this, they take the rest of the meat to the school's cafeteria, where the chef happily buys the quality products. Later, as the kids walk back to class, Reyes asks Rhea if he has learned how to fly properly. He nods, revealing that a girl from Rationality helped him master the skill. Kunan tells Rhea that if he manages to fully master flying, he can easily turn his skill into a courier business. Rhea thanks him for the idea and tells his classmates that he's thinking on joining the Rationality faction. Hank also explains that he was invited to Harmony, while Reyes tells everyone she was invited to join Ability. Hearing this, Kunan realizes that he's the only one who hasn't gotten an invite yet. Hank feels surprised, but Rhea reminds everyone that the three factions are still fighting to decide which one gets to invite him first. Back in the school's grounds, the three faction leaders struggle to get up after their fight. Bale gets up first, so he declares that Ability will be the first to invite Kunan. Shido accepts her second place, while the Lulu resigns himself to fate. Shido notes that Lulu was at a disadvantage during their fight. Despite his disadvantage, Lulu refuses to be a sore loser and accepts being third. With the order decided, Bale calls one of his biggest boy magnets of the faction to begin her mission to recruit Kunan. That was episode 11. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.